Hello, everyone. How's everybody doing? We're back here with Warhammer of. I believe we're going to be very silly today because we're talking about High Elves. I have with me Ginger, as usual.
Hello, Ginger, aka Scott, aka the man who wakes up early to record a podcast.
Yeah. Remember, I'm an hour ahead of you.
Yeah,
I'm an hour behind you.
you're the woman who wakes up even earlier to record a podcast.
And with us, we have the lovely and talented Attica Imperialis.
Hello everyone, I am the reason they are up so early to record because, lest you forget, I am in the UK, I am 5 to 6 hours in front of you. You wanted me to record at 2 a.m. on a Monday morning. No thank you. But yes, hello, I'm Tactica Imperialis, also known as Neve, and I have actually got some fantasy knowledge. I did play High Elves, but I'm definitely not the expert that I sometimes profess to be on my own show. So, yes, hello.
Well, you probably know more than me because half the concept of the show is feed this person who knows a lot about it, and me who knows, like, I give the comparison. I know a little bit about 40K because on a road trip, a friend of mine kind of gave me the Sparks Note abridged version of everything, and I know 40K and fantasy are different worlds, but it's still same energy. And I've watched Fee play a few Warhammer games, and I played like Vermintide for like 2 hours, so that's about my knowledge and all the podcasts we've done.
Yeah, fair. I mean, I haven't picked up Old World, but I played 8th edition fantasy. Like the Island of Blood box game was my sort of in route. And I kept an eye on it up till the end times, but then when Age of Sigmar came out, I fully went all in on Sigmar and haven't really looked at fantasy again since.
And me over here getting ready to run the one edition of Warhammer Fantasy tabletop that Games Workshop can't send a cease and desist over.
Is this 9th Age?
Second edition, actually, that Fantasy Flight made. They own half of it, so Games Workshop can't actually tell me no.
Wait, so without going into the weeds too much, why is that the only edition that you can run and not get sued? Yet I'm assuming all the others, they can sue the pants off of you.
Oh, because Fantasy Flight Games has this really weird habit when they make a game that's they license through someone else of licensing it in such a way that they own half of it. And if you, I don't know, were to go to Gen Con and get an express letter of permission from the director of Fantasy Flight Games to, and I quote, do what you want.
Is the letter literally that meme from Parks and Rec where he's like, hold on, I got a permit for this. And the guy goes, all this says is I can do what I want.
No. It's actually in a lot of legalese. But
but that would have been hilarious if they gave you the legal one, but just as a joke, they also gave you that one.
I would not have put it past him. Okay, the man, when I walked up to him, the man was currently dressed in balloons to look like a gnome and walking around in a balloon gnome suit.
Please tell me you have a picture of this.
It's on the what's it called? It's in the blog from Gen Con.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
I do.
Okay.
And I was just like, I can't believe that I'm talking to you right now, much less the fact that you're literally walking around in balloons to look like a gnome wizard. I have so many questions about my life right now.
Fee, you've been to enough conventions at this point. Are you still surprised?
Anyway, do you want us to call you Tactica or Neve? We need to get that out of the way real quick.
Yeah, I was about to ask.
I don't massively care. Like, online, I am Tactica, always have been. But I also, Neve's my name, and I think there's a portion of people who don't actually realize that I've transitioned, because from before I transitioned back in like 2022 formally, nothing's changed in terms of the presentation of the podcast, and I've uploaded like 2 videos. So I don't think most people have actually even noticed, if they don't follow me outside of the channel, that I've actually or outside of podcasters, that I've actually transitioned. So I don't much care. It doesn't matter. By all means, just flip between the two. Because I mean,
You know what? No. having been there and done that, we're going to call you Neve because it feels really nice to have people use my name.
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, I agree with that. I don't really massively mind because I'm so used to just being called Miss because I work in a school. For those who don't know, I'm actually a teacher, so my name's just like whatever. So the kids go, "You're right, Miss," and it's like, "Yeah, that will do." If I get that far, then I'm winning. So it doesn't bother me all that much. And I did say when I did the posters, I was like, "Tactic is fine, just don't use my dead name." Whoop-de-doo. So yeah, either or works. By all means, switch between the two. So whatever.
Yeah, and
Anyway,
I'm glad you asked the question, Fee, because as a cis ally, I like to know that. First of all, just even in general, even people who aren't transitioning, still even more. I'm like, okay, I don't care what name you go by, just tell me what you want me to call you. Because I also had like I staffed an anime convention this past weekend, and surprise, surprise, sometimes people in that community, because it's a safe space, are more open with that. But I'm like, I've known people that I knew in college that I know, quote unquote, their dead name, but it's that weird, and it's obviously I know it's a point by point basis. Like I have this friend where they're like, oh no, Scott, you can call me this name because that's the name you knew me, but you've asked, so it's fine. But I
Yeah, and
like to
that's
call
why
people by the name they want to be known.
no, it's fine. Is that's why the channel is just what it is. That is who I am online. I admit I might look to get some. Well, you've got the artwork that has been used for this show is sort of a modification of a commission I did with permission to shout the artist out.
go ahead.
With Arsenic Typhoon, they did the original art. It's actually a Lumineth, a Blade Lord, that was done as a commission, which has then been modified down into this sort of sword mistress of Hoeth. And the irony is, I don't even own my Lumineth anymore. I've sold the lot, with the exception of my Teclis. So I don't even own the mini that color scheme is based on anymore. So, so yeah, I probably need to get a proper bit of power art done and or maybe to get the podcaster's art changed. But that's a long and hard-working process because artists are incredibly busy and incredibly talented people.
No,
so...
wait. Adeptus Podcastus, you're just wearing a crisis suit.
Cold Star suit to be exact, because back in the days of, do you remember Remlaze's Quest for Knowledge series?
Yes,
Well,
I participated in that.
yes, okay, yes, good point, but I forgot that one. But I was due to be in it, in the next bit that Rem was going to do. I'd even recorded some voice lines ready, and it was always going to be the character in that battlesuit. That battlesuit was done as part of a backstory I'd written for my in-universe 40k stories persona. Was this sort of Tau Earthcast scientist who had also, got a battle suit, which was complete fan fiction nonsense because it was 2015 and I was a moron. But that suit has stuck around ever since I stepped away from Farsight as being sort of the avatar I used. It's always been that suit, and you've only seen outside that suit 3 times. One is the old channel artwork, which was done by Xenook, which has got the outside the suit and was the channel logo, and I think still is the channel logo actually. Narina did a piece of art for me for Remlaze for when I transitioned, which Remlaze commissioned without my knowledge. And then when I did episode 200 of Podcasters or Quizcasters 2, no, 2? Yeah, 2. The second Quizcasters, I had my daughter with me on the show, and Narina did a sketch based on that. So in terms of actual outside the suit art, there's 2.5 pieces of work ever done outside the suit. So I need to get something more done with that, I think. So yeah, I think that's got to be done.
That's entirely fair. Anyway, so since you're the guest, we're going to ask you first. How are you? How has your week been?
Busy. I've painted my entire garden fence because apparently I can't stop painting even when I'm not painting minis. I've done a Fire Warrior team, a Tide War drone port, finished off a squad of Chosen, finished off a squad of Havocs that I've been meaning to do for absolutely like over a year. I built some tiny planes that I bought 4 years ago. And it's actually my birthday in between the recording and the next episode, or when this episode comes out. So I have decided I'm going to use the birthday money I've been given because I wasn't going to do this. I'm going to buy the Imperial Agents Combat Patrol because the Inquisition stuff looks really freaking cool. Yeah, I've not had too bad of a week. And like I say, I've got my birthday coming up, but I've also got the start of the school year. So yay me.
Now, because again, my little knowledge was, well, you mentioned the planes. Are we talking military or civilian planes?
Aeronautica Imperialis Tau Barracudas.
Say that again a little bit slower.
So, do you remember Aeronautica Imperialis?
Don't even
He
know
has
what.
never played 40K.
Right, okay, so a fair few years ago, you know how at the moment they're doing like Legions Imperialis with the tiny tanks and the tiny miniatures and
Yeah.
the tiny titans? Well, before that, there was Adeptus Titanicus, which was all about knights and titans fighting. And alongside that, as a second game, was Aeronautica Imperialis, which was done as air combat. It's a hex-based game with tiny planes. Like, we're talking, this entire Barracuda fighter is about the height of a stealth battle suit, maybe a crisis suit. No, not a crisis suit. About a stealth battle suit in terms of its length. And hyper detailed. And when I moved to where I currently live, back in COVID, I bought a box of tiny planes because I thought they were cool. And they've sat in my shed and in the Warhammer Club box at my school for the last 4 years, untouched. And I decided, screw it, I'm going to build the tiny planes and paint them in rainbow configuration so that I've got one plane of each color of the rainbow.
Cool.
I've done the base coat, and then I decided to do all the other projects I was working on to get them finished, because I'll actually use them, because Aeronautica is now defunct, because it's all been rolled into Legions Imperialis, and Tau aren't in that. So, yeah, they're just sort of, they'll be a fun little thing to do one day when I'm not busy. But I'm always busy, so who knows?
Now, this is kind of a question to both of you, because I've played 40K tabletop once, and you kind of mentioned earlier when I forget which one we were talking about, how the Navy game isn't really incorporated well. Is it a similar story with like the Air Force in like 40K and Warhammer, where it's kind of there, but most people just do the equivalent of armies?
It's more like lore-wise, the air and space forces are incredibly important, but tabletop-wise, Games Workshop has made zero effort to implement them.
That's not exactly correct, because every army almost has an aircraft in it.
Yeah, but they're more like the aircraft they have is more like a ground strike craft and not like, actual air-to-air fighting.
There's a mix. So, like, to take Tau, because that's the army I mostly play, they've got the Sun Shark Bomber, which is air to ground, and the Razor Shark, which is both air to ground and air to air. The Imperial Guard have the Valkyrie, which is both air and space fighter. The Space Marines have the Storm Raven gunship, which I grant you it's not a Thunderhawk, but it's a baby Thunderhawk, so it kind of counts. It sort of depends on which faction you're working with as to how effective their fighters are, but air combat is not really a dedicated part of the game. They're just treated as extremely fast units that have a special rule that means you can't hit them from the ground in melee combat, for example, among a few other things.
Okay. But Fee, do you want to go or shall I go?
You go ahead, Ginger.
Okay. I've had a bunch of weird, some things I can't disclose for annoying legal reasons, but I just will say this one thing in regards to the legal thing. American professional insurance can go fuck themselves.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm not a violent person, but let's just say what they've done has caused me to want to do violent things. Full disclosure, I will not do any of it, but it gives me violent emotions. But on a much more fun note, this past weekend, I staffed an anime convention, and said convention is Pop Cult Anime Convention. It's in Waltham, Massachusetts, but for argument's sake, it's Western Boston, so you have an idea of where in the world it's located. It's one of more like those smaller ones, sub 1,000. But for that on that convention, I was mostly in the main events room, which held about 100, 150 people. And my job that weekend was to be both the stage manager and the board op. And I had staffed it last year, and I was told, oh, everything's taken care of. You just need to be stage manager. And of course, some things just weren't working in there. I'm like, no, I have all of my own tech equipment that I'm going to bring the next year, which is the advantage of driving to a convention as opposed to, because the last convention I took a train, and I'm sure, there's always the whole issues of like when you're flying or taking the train, there's only so much. And you always have that constant worry of like, am I packing enough? Did I forget this? And the nice thing about when you do it with the car, you're like, oh, I'll just chuck everything in my car because it would just be by myself. So I'm like, I got plenty of room. So I brought my soundboard. I then brought my Pelican case, which had a bunch of all my little sound tools that I use, and then some other stuff. And I was just like, and I still had some issues, but that was because the guy we rented the equipment from, without going into too much details, there was supposed to be 4 outputs on the box that would send out because we needed to do a long run from front of house to the stage. Only 2 of the 4 outs worked because I wanted to do mains, sub, and monitors, and then I also had to send a feed to the backstage. So I wasted 45 minutes trying to figure that out. But that was the bad ends of things. The good ends was I had also talked with at Pop Cult. We have obviously a masquerade like almost every anime convention does, but we also have what's called a idol showcase. As you can imagine, people dressing up as idols from different idol animes and doing dances on stage. I worked with both of them ahead of time to make sure I had all of the files and like talked with them. I'm like, okay, here's what we're gonna do. I also had a staffer who's, I'm gonna shout him out. His name is Jace. The dude was absolutely amazing because he kind of had similar experiences to me, but he had more variety and more kind of on the stage. So like, he just was my stage ninja, which especially for the masquerade was super helpful because anyone who's been to a convention that has a masquerade, there's a lot of moving parts. And having someone who's just dedicated to making sure people can get on the stage, get their stuff off the stage, or just, little things that are happening. That way I didn't have to run from the front of house, which is where I was mixing, all the way there. That was great. We had like one little snafu, but it was like the judging took longer than expected because the acts were so good this year that like the judges had to deliberate even longer. But the show running itself went very smoothly and people had a great time. And one of the key things I made sure was to have what's called monitors. And these are not monitors, your television monitor, the monitor you're looking for your computer. This is the term used for speakers that are placed on the stage so that performers could hear themselves. And I noticed this year there was a huge improvement at least in that aspect, because I put through all that work and everyone could like hear themselves. Because slide rant, I've staffed, and I'm going to call them out on this, Anime Boston. I've staffed Anime Boston several times. I've worked in their main events rooms. I was kind of a stagehand, and it was the most frustrating thing where performers could barely hear themselves, even though you have this ginormous sound system. No one could be bothered to place 2 speakers on the stage facing the performers. And it's even weirder because I know that the convention rented speakers because we almost always have a band play. So I'm like, the speaker's there. They're on site. You just don't want to do it. But I could go on a whole rant on that. But it was cool that people were able to do the performances there and they had a great time. And then another highlight was I wasn't supposed to Sunday morning do the lip sync battle. But apparently one of the staffers, his car had an issue and he had to do it. So I then did it at the last minute, but I'm like, okay, cool. And it was an absolute ton of fun. I've never been to one, but I was like, okay, this is a fun thing. I have a drone that a video fly drone I'm borrowing, and I got permission from the guy who ran it. I'm like, hey, can I film like the finals? And he went, cool, you have my permission, let me check with the audience. So like before the finals, he asked the audience, hey, we have a drone, cool if we do it. And the entire crowd like goes, hell yes. And I was like, all right, sweet. So it was definitely some fun times, but it was also kind of a little bittersweet because, Neve, I don't think you know this. I'm going to be working on a cruise ship in a few weeks. And it's this bittersweet feeling of like, I won't be able to be at a convention for at least another year or two. So it was like this moment of like, this is a ton of fun, but this isn't going to happen again for a while.
Yeah, I can believe that. I mean, I've never been to a con. It's one of those things of I think it's more an American thing. I know there is a lot of them in the UK, but it seems like much more of an American thing with conventions. I don't necessarily know why. Uh, but yeah, I can see that of, when you're so used to doing something and you enjoy doing it, and then you get a really exciting opportunity. It's like, that's amazing. Oh, but what about? No, I do understand that. I do get that.
Yeah, yeah, and there was this kind of strange feeling too of like I didn't say this. Someone else on staff said they were almost everyone who told I told because some people weren't aware of it because I wasn't like publicly broadcasting it on social media. But when people found out, they were excited. But I think it was like the vice con chair said to me, "We're going to need 3 people to replace you because not to toot my own horn, I have a very I have a I have a diverse set of skills. Obviously, I do sound, but I also have done security at conventions. I've ran programming, so it's very hard to find someone to replace me. So hence the joke, 3 other people. But yeah, and it's interesting. I also know too, and you would think almost at least how the geography of England works that going to cons in theory would be more of a thing because everyone's kind of closer and you guys have better like yeah, it's got problems like ours, but you guys have better public transportation than we do. So you would think in theory that scene would be bigger than in
Yeah,
America.
I'm
And I
sure it is.
Okay,
And
okay. I can explain this because I have seen the inner workings of Comic-Con London and also the London My Little Pony convention. The reason why it's not bigger is the absurd cost for permits to run the event in the UK.
ah,
Like, UK PonyCon, I think, has close to 2,000 attendees, and they run it on a college in a college campus facility, and about 30% of their ticket sales is licensing. That's how much they have to pay to license the local government to allow them to run the event. Because unlike in the US, where a convention can consider itself a charity event because they run a charity auction and they don't make a profit, in the UK you can't do that for the whole convention. So yes, you have the charity portion, but you can't classify the whole convention under that umbrella. So you have to pay all the licensing costs of um a business convention and the licensing costs to prove that the company who owns your particular IP has either said yes to the event or has not told you no. And you have to get it approved through like two different the through the local constabulary, the city council, and the county council to run your event.
yeah,
And those all cost money.
Yeah, I should also point out that there isn't the whole yes everyone's closer together thing, but also that constricts actually space for said event to run, but also
yeah.
access. Like
Mhm.
for example, Games Day. I'm going to stick with Warhammer. Games Day. Games Day used to run at the NEC in Birmingham. Now I've been to the NEC, the is it National Event Centre? I forget its actual name. The NEC is a behemoth of a building to the point that it pretty much has its own train station.
Oh damn.
It's an absolute behemoth, the NEC. But if you're going to hire it out, you're absolutely right. But there's also the problem of if you're doing it somewhere else or you want to avoid those immense costs, you've then got to think about parking or public transport links. So London, if you want to go into London and drive into London, which is where these events are commonly held,
Don't drive into London.
exactly, because congestion charges, ULEZ, all the other things, I'm not going to get into politics. It's extremely expensive and constrictive and slow to drive to London, to which you say, okay, get the train then. Well, I used to live in Manchester, which is the sort of third city in England, and that's up in the north of England. It takes 3 hours on a train and cost, like, I went there for an interview, to London for an interview, and it cost me like £60+ to get a return ticket to London from Manchester. Now, that is like the same as the cost of the ticket for the event. like your costs are extremely high on the consumer, as well as because the event needs to cover its costs. And also we've got really like complex privatized rail systems, and it's not anyway, I'm not getting into politics.
Right.
But it is really expensive to travel to London. And if you hold the event somewhere outside of London, then say it's the NEC, you've got the event hire costs to deal with. Or if you want to do it in another city, you've got event hire, the city issues that Fee was describing, all this stuff. It all adds up so that these events probably don't get the same amount of attendees. Consider as well, there's just less people going to go to an event in the UK than the US because population dense size and all of that has to be taken into account. If you're going to make a profit, like Gen Con or Nova, I don't know how many people were at Nova, the Nova Open this last week, for the events, including the 40k reveals and the tournaments and all of that. But I guarantee that the number of people there will be astronomical compared to the similar event in the UK. I would expect anyway.
And then say here in the US, you don't have to have permission from the local government to run an event at all. You just have to have permission from the owners of the venue and pay for the venue.
Yeah, and the other thing too is also like from what few I know in England are usually the big huge ones, thus they can have the funds and the capita to pay all those things. In America, like you just mentioned, you just need the venue, and also because in America, because of the way our geography is, like perfect example is Pop called AnimeCon, is it's able to keep running because we can afford a lot of, there's, again, I can't speak to Europe, but at least in America, you can often have hotels that have a convention center or convention space within it. So all you're dealing with in theory is that one venue. And you
Well,
then
some
buy
hotels in the UK do have like conference rooms, but when I say
Right.
conference room, I mean they hold about 20 people.
Right. In America, at least, like, again, facing on the venue we were at, like our main events room could hold about 100, 150 people. And then we had smaller panel rooms. And also, I think, but even on the Europe thing, I know at least in Germany, but I'm assuming Germany's laws are probably different. There's at least one big one. I don't know the name of it, but yeah, it's an interesting comparison when you mention how that I didn't even think about that. Also, like, again, I'll just briefly end on this. Like to go to Anime Boston when I staffed it, I could park at a subway station, otherwise known as the T in Boston because it's Boston. It was like parking was, I think, like $10 a day, which is pretty reasonable, and then I could take it in there, and to get a pass was say $10-20. So already I can see, even to go to a big one, there aren't a whole lot of costs. So okay, interesting. Fee, what have you been up to? Because we could probably talk about this topic for a while.
I was at Everfree Northwest, where I put on a bunch of. I ended up doing a total of 8 panels over the course of the weekend.
Jesus, you were like, I even remember.
I was signed up for 5 when I got on the plane Thursday.
Please tell me they gave you some extra compensation for doing extra panels.
They fully paid for my flight, fully paid for my hotel room, including an extra day in Seattle to do whatever I wanted on Monday, and they paid for all of my luggage, the cabs to and from the airport, and for absolute spite purposes, I got all of the autographs I didn't have for free.
Okay, I can see that's pretty cool.
I will literally look at Everfree, and for like the last 3 years, I've looked at Everfree and said, okay, how many panels you want? 5? 20? Just give me a number. Because I know for a fact that they're going to take care of me. I'm going to have a good time. And if anything goes wrong, it will be fixed quietly within 24 hours, no questions asked, or I will be compensated and apologized to. Their staff is incredibly professional and really good at hiding the fire.
Yeah,
These conventions are on fire.
Every convention is on fire. No convention is not on fire. They just hide it. Some hide it better than others.
And I came home, caught up on work. I did not get to go get my car yesterday because the mechanic had to go home, and my bank apparently. So Scott, I still use the Native American bank in Alabama that has like 3 branches.
Yeah.
So I tried to call my bank yesterday, and couldn't get a hold of them. Like, they wouldn't pick up the phone. So I called my and I'm going to say this, and I want everyone to understand that I have a very bad relationship with this person. I called my racist grandmother to find, because she works at that bank, to find out what was going on. They'd been sent home early on a holiday weekend where they're not going to be open till Tuesday.
Oh wait,
dear.
yeah, it's Labor Day weekend, or does that have nothing to do with it?
Yeah, no, that has something to, they're going to be closed Monday. And today they're closed. Do you want to know why they were sent home early?
Why?
Because they thought they had a legitimate threat that the bank was going to be robbed. So rather than have the employees deal with the stress, they sent them all home early.
Which, when you think about it, okay, cool, nice, but it's one of those yay you care about your employees kind of thing, but it's a weird, okay.
I would have thought that no, you just send home the people who are there for in-customer service home, lock the doors, and let people do drive-through and phone calls. No, they sent the whole bank home. And I'm like, oh. So if anyone needs to do anything, screw you till Tuesday. I'm glad you sent your employees home because you thought you had a legitimate problem. I'm not okay with it being on a holiday weekend and it's going to screw everybody until Tuesday. So my car is basically locked up till Tuesday. That's the only bad news of the entire week.
Yeah, I mean, the only time I've ever been told I can go home early from work has boiled down to the weather. Like, I appreciate, where you guys are, you have very different weather systems to us, but it's raining and
Well,
Like,
Nev, to
lit-
give you context, I live in Vermont, so hence New England, so I know exactly the weather you deal with.
fair
Okay.
point. But yeah,
Okay.
it's like literally, I've been sent home from work early twice in my career, and well, no, three. Sorry, one was they're probably going to put us in lockdown for the pandemic this tonight. Just go home. Two was it's probably going to flood. Go home. And three is if you stay, you're going to get snowed in. Go home. That's it. You don't get the day off early because I don't know. Maybe it's just because we have actual sensible laws around guns. Sorry, I'm not going to let that one drop with the Americans. Just sort your
Please
bloody.
go for it. You're talking to someone who also believes in tighter gun control, so go for it.
Yeah, genuinely, it's I when it's a really odd tangent to go on, but like Fallout London, shouldn't have guns. Like I remember a YouTuber I watched quite a lot, many a true nerd, was saying when if they ever make a Fallout game in the UK, like guns should be incredibly rare because we don't have guns in the UK.
Yeah, like
So
you would
just
And then they did make a Fallout game in the UK, and
was it a
you don't
mod?
get a
game.
gun for you don't get a someone made a mod for it. You don't get a gun for the first hour.
yeah, exactly.
Like in my theory of Fallout New London would be mainly like physical or like fisticuff builds, I feel.
Yeah,
No,
melee
no, no, no,
builds
no.
should be knife and melee builds absolutely all
yeah.
over the place. But yeah, gun builds should be a lot less common. But anyway, that's separate to the point. It's just like I admit I don't work in jobs that well, I work in a place that could be considered quite a security place because it's a school. You've got to safeguard your pupils, and literally the first thing you do when you start the new school year is you go and read the booklet about how to safeguard pupils. It's literally the first thing you do because if you don't do that, you can't work at a school. And everyone's security checked, and there's gates and CCTV, and it's quite commonplace these days because of various incidents. But yeah, we've never had a full-on lockdown drill or had to send pupils home because of clear and present danger. The only time we've ever sent the kids home is the weather or COVID. That's it.
Fee and I both getting flashbacks to our American school system experience.
Anyway, moving on.
Sorry.
No, it's fine.
Feel free to cut that out. If it's a bit of a rant, feel free to
No,
cut that out.
no. I'm not cutting it out. I'm just I did want to highlight one thing about the weather. Having been in the UK for an extended period of time and then lived in the United States, I'm going to phrase this in the way that is probably the best and quickest to understand. UK inclement weather is a joke.
Oh yeah, it's not as heavy as yours, but we're not built for it.
I'm just like my parents-in-law were like, "Oh, it's gonna storm today," and I'm like, "Okay." And then they came out and said, "Oh, did you see the lightning?" And I'm like, "There was like one bolt." And they're like, well, what is it like in America? And I just reach over, type in thunderstorm on my phone, and turn it around and turn it to full volume. And they're like, we'd be dead. I'm like,
Yeah, well,
but
actually, funny enough,
yes.
around the time I turned 18, I went on holiday to Florida to Orlando, to be more exact. It was before I transitioned. Don't worry, I wasn't putting myself in any danger.
No, I lived in Florida, so I can already tell where this is going.
Yeah, and we didn't get caught in the storm. We were back at the property we were staying in, but a thunderstorm came through, and Jesus H Christ. Yeah, I get it. We know that our weather is quite moderate, but the difference is that we're not built for it. So, like, for example, if you go to Spain or Italy or Greece or those sorts of places like the southern Europe, they have like if they have 20, 30 degrees centigrade. We use an actual fucking sensible system, you geniuses. When it's 20, 30 degrees Celsius, there it's hot but completely manageable because A, air conditioning, and B, the houses are designed with that in mind. 30 degrees in the UK is horrendous because our houses are designed to survive and insulate at about 3 degrees Celsius. So they're designed completely differently. But there's also a bit of a joke in England because I come from the north, which is Manchester, Yorkshire, Liverpool, Newcastle, that end of England versus London. And it's like, oh, it's a real strong weather system coming in. People in London are advised to stock up on supplies, not go out of the house. Yeah, people in the north, you just need your big coat because northern weather is so much worse than southern weather.
Yeah.
Or more accurately, northerners are much better built at handling the weather. So
What's with
goes
your
the
accent?
joke.
What's with your accent? Oh, every planet has a north. But yeah, yeah, it's a similar thing in both Vermont. Like, if it's less than 2 inches of snow, everyone's like, yeah, whatever, gonna work. And in Florida, if if it's a less than a if it's less than a category 2 hurricane, so if it's a 1 or what's called a tropical storm and then tropical depression, everyone just goes, okay, it's gonna be rainy.
Yeah, it's all a matter of perspective.
Exactly. So
So yeah.
so enough. So, Fee, was there anything else you wanted to talk about, or is that it? And then we can get into the topic.
That's it.
The question.
We
I'll then
can.
start out to transition to this. Why are we starting with high elves and not starting with just your vanilla elves?
Okay.
Because there is no such thing as vanilla elves.
Correct.
It's like that scene in Forrest Gump where he lists off all the uses of shrimp. Is it like that energy?
Not exactly. So back in the old days, I'm talking like the origins of the world before mankind really evolved, there was just the elves. They lived on Ulthuan. They were very much a bit like the high elves of more modern old world and fantasy. They were just the elves. They fought a great war against chaos and were able to create the magical vortex through the magic of Calador.
Mm-hmm. We're gonna get to that. We're gonna get to all that.
Okay, which presented the Earth being destroyed by chaos, and then the Sundering happened, where Malekith.
No. Hold on, Tactica. Hold on. I need you to hold your horses for 1 second. We have to introduce them first.
No, this is the back. This is the to me. This was the introductory segment. This is just their backstory about how they came to be. But fair enough. Go ahead.
He usually reads a quote and then we go into all this.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry. This is one of the things that I should have done more homework and actually watched a few episodes more than I did to actually get.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
So, during our long lives, we are all able to perfect many skills, and our people are renowned for our highly skilled artisans, fine craftsmen, the beauty of our art, and the meticulous grace of our songs. All in all, we are a race that loves beauty and treasures skill, but our days are not all spent in idle pursuit. For Swordmaster of Hoeth has studied the blade longer than your family has existed. Ulthwe, Windrider, Herald of the Phoenix King. So, we're going to talk about High Elves, as Tactica has gotten hyper excited about and jumped ahead of the script.
Sorry.
It's okay. Tactica, what I would like for you to do for Ginger's sake, because 99% of the terms you just used are foreign concepts to him.
Yep.
How about we start with this? Do you know who the first Phoenix King was?
Nope. An Aryan.
There we go.
Took me a bloody
Okay.
second.
Do you care to explain to the audience why he's called the Phoenix King? Or
Vaguely.
what a Phoenix King is?
So, the Phoenix King is the supreme ruler of the High Elves. He's the leader, by either in a military sense or a diplomatic sense. Primarily, we think of them in a military context, even though they never had a miniature for any of them. They are sort of the one in charge. They are elected, in a manner of speaking, or at least they are by the end of the timeline. But this goes back to that great war against chaos I just mentioned. So, demons invaded from the north through ginormous, we'll call them warp rifts because they're basically the same thing. Portals to the realm of chaos from the north of the old world. And the elves are getting their butts kicked. Badly. Anarian, who was sort of a champion of the elves, the title Phoenix King, I don't know if it existed at this exact moment in time. Anarian was one of the mightiest warriors in all of Ulthuan, which is the place where the elves live. It's kind of fantasy Britain.
Okay.
Sorry. But it doesn't look anything like Britain. It's kind of like a ringed island with a narrow gap at the bottom.
It's what if Atlantis really existed?
Yeah, we've talked we briefly skimmed the geography, and I made the joke that it's that this world is like our world, except like it was like someone who rapidly lost a lot of weight, so it's weirdly like flabby in areas. So yeah, no, I have a picture of what this world's map looks like.
Okay, so near to Ulthuan is the Shrine of Cain. Now, Cain is a name you might know. He was the elven god of war, and the Eldar one if you also follow 40k. And on that island is a sword, the Blade of Cain, also known as the Widowmaker, who has nothing to do.
Just for confirmation of in the map, is it that island that exists in the middle of what's the equivalent of our Atlantic Ocean, or are we still in quote unquote England?
We are. It's not in the middle. The in the middle of Ulthuan is the Shrine of the Phoenix Kings, and I forget its exact name. Like I'm just going to call it Phoenix Island because I don't remember its name.
Mind just putting the map up? Send me the map again, Fee, just so I have context, because there's a lot of places.
Yeah, the Shrine of Cain is not far from Ulthuan. I believe it's to the northwest, towards where Nagaroth would eventually be, but I'm not actually sure off the top of my head. Anyway, wherever it exactly is, there is a sword. Think Sword in the Stone type thing. Mm-hmm. And this sword is the blade of the god of war himself. It is, well, so goes the mythos. A blade of great power, but will also curse not just you, your line forever. But out of desperation, Anarian gets the sword and goes on a murder spree, because Cain is also the god of murder. And this helps to not quite turn the tide, but buy enough time for the elven mages, led by Calidor, which is also the name given to a region of Ulthuan, Calidor Dragon Tamer, who was sort of the first sort of high mage equivalent. And he and his coven, not that's probably the right term, but it'll do, created a spell known as the Vortex. If you played Total War Warhammer 2, you'll know what the Vortex is.
Okay, Side note for everybody who doesn't, the Vortex is a giant magical prison in which all of the spare magic and random bits of chaos that is leaking into Ulthuan and the immediate large surrounding area is funneled together into a giant vortex where it is then purified very slowly over the course of, I don't know, a fistful of it takes about 100 years. But as it's purified, it's let back out into the world, thereby making it where demons can't just spawn randomly and stay here.
Yeah, if you want a household analogy, think like the rifts in the north are like a leak in your sink, and the vortex acts as your plug hole.
And if the vortex breaks, the whole water main just came undone, and it came undone in your house.
Yes, and also not just your house. The entire world is now drowning in water, but the water is actually demons.
Well, there's your problem.
So, so Calidor makes the vortex. The demons are driven away because their magical energy that's sustaining them has been siphoned and stored up. This traps Calidor within the vortex along with the other mages, and they are believed to be continually working that spell to this day, or they're frozen in time. It's not made exactly clear how it works, but it doesn't matter. For the sake of this, it doesn't matter. Aenarion, as the great leader of the elven armies during this time, becomes their de facto leader. And where the title Phoenix King comes from, I cannot remember. But I have remembered the name of the bloody island now. On the shrine of Asuryan, who is the Phoenix god, the king of the elven gods, a shrine to him is in the center of Ulthuan. And the mythos behind the Phoenix Kings goes that whoever is duly elected Phoenix King will have to walk through the flames of the shrine of Asuryan, and if they are harmed, then they are not worthy. If they are not harmed, then they are worthy, and they assume the mantle of Phoenix King. However, Aenarion got married to Morathi, which you haven't done Dark Elves yet. You'll learn who Morathi is. I'll spare you the preamble. And they had a son, and his name is Malekith, which is a name that even if you haven't studied Dark Elves, you should probably know.
So I'm going to clarify this. Morathi is technically leader of the Cult of Pleasure, aka most of Slaaneish's followers in existence. And Malekith, well, he's the reason why the High Elves have been in a 6,000-year civil war.
Oh yeah, that's Civil War.
So the reason for that is when Aenarion died, because, you know, everybody dies eventually, even elves, Malekith and Morathi assumed that the mantle of Phoenix King would go to Malekith, because Morathi had been manipulating things behind the scenes. She's a schemer and all of that. So Malekith went to the Shrine of Asuryan and went to walk through the flame as had been decreed as process, and he got incinerated, like burnt so badly that he couldn't even stand the heat and had to get out of the kitchen. And
to illustrate this, it took him 46 years to recover enough to stand up.
Whoa. Now
we will come up. Sorry, go on.
Well, this is without getting too much. Do elves have normal healing factor, slow, fast? Like where
they normally they heal about the same speed that humans and dwarves do.
But they use magic to accelerate most of those processes.
So you think 47 years, even with magic, woof.
The magic didn't do bugger all, because remember, this has supposedly been spurned by the king of the gods. Walk that one off.
Yeah, so this is god magic bullshit.
Yeah, the fact that Malekith even survived is miraculous. Now, there is bullshit connected to this, but that doesn't come until the end of the timeline. We'll get back to that. So Malekith and his followers, who are concentrated in Nagarith, not Nagaroth, Nagarith, which is a northwestern area of Ulthuan.
Warhammer Canada.
No, that's Nagaroth. Nagarith is part of Ulthuan.
My bad.
Yes, sorry. You've got to be really careful, because the Nagarith elves, after Malekith's, had already started a revolution to get Malekith to the shrine in the first place, but after that they fled to the land to the northwest of across the oceans, which they rechristened as Nagaroth. They became the Dark Elves. This event is known as the Sundering, and was a titanic civil war, as has been mentioned, that shattered the High Elves and the Dark Elves apart, and also caused the elves to retreat from what we know as the Old World. The ones that refused to leave sort of quote-unquote evolved and became the Wood Elves of Athel Loren. This is why elves are so rarely seen, even at the point where the Old World timeline is at, because after the issues involving this, they retreated from the Old World and left them to it, pretty much until the point of Tyrion and Teclis at the end of the timeline.
Now, it should be emphasized, the High Elves are the ones who are rarely seen. Wood Elves have a different reason for why they're rarely seen, and the quote Sea Elves, who are really just High Elves that didn't go back to Ulthuan, they have elvish quarters where they generally don't allow people without proper business or a reason to be there to enter into the elvish quarter at all. And that's only on the coastal cities around, say, the Venetian merchants of Tilia, or the border princes, or very specific Marienburg, very specific ports.
Yeah, so it wasn't that elves became like a myth, but they were very much like shrouded in mystery, and no one knew where they came from. Meanwhile, the Civil War never really ended. As much as Malekith was out of commission for a while, the Dark Elves and the High Elves pretty much never stopped fighting. There were only lulls in the fighting. And that has pretty much engulfed why the High Elves are the way they are. They had to shift their society to constantly be able to have a standing civilian army, but not in the sense like the Empire does, where it has an army and civilians. Every elven civilian is trained to fight. And so that means that when something happens, let's say there's an incursion in Eotane, which is in the southeast, then you can just raise up a civilian levy and go. And they form your core units, your spearmen and your archers. The elite units are, well, elite and actual proper trained soldiers. Everybody else is a civilian military. But as the quote from Fiora said earlier, they've been around a lot longer, and therefore even a civilian soldier can still outshoot a human at 5,000 yards.
Now,
go ahead.
Question for you, Fee. Would you say then the civilian ones are the equivalent of in America our National Guard?
I would place them at National Guard, but it's not like the standard National Guard. It's more like the National Guard who signed up for life.
Okay.
It's more, I was thinking of it like the Minutemen, but like professionally trained.
In a modern sense, it would be our National Guard, but it's the National Guard soldiers who signed up for 30 or 40 years, rather than the national, because just for the experience difference. Also, I would say this: the reason why it's, remember how the goblin who managed to like go terrorize the elves on their own island for a little while,
Misty
Ginger?
Mountain.
Ginger, you remember that? Remember that big fat goblin?
Yeah, who I kind of liked. He was kind of fun.
So the reason why that's such a great success for anyone at all is because when you invade an elven city, you're not just like fighting the elven city's military. You're fighting the whole damn city, like every single person who lives there.
Yeah, it's like the joke about it, in the South where everyone has a gun. It's the equivalent of you're invading the South, but not only does everyone have a gun, but everyone knows how to use the gun properly.
Yes, and
yeah, but then
all of their guns are better than yours. Sorry, Tacticus, go ahead.
I was gonna say, and throw in magic.
Yeah.
Because, well, even though like the mages of Sathari are considered sort of the elite mages, most, if not all, elves have got some innate magic within them, and thus most of them can't use it unless they go and train. But that's still a thing. Like trying to invade Ulthuan, like the Grom the Paunch, I think, is the only invasion of Ulthuan that succeeded for probably more than 5 minutes that was not committed by a Dark Elf. Like, Chaos never got another foothold on Ulthuan until the end times. The Skaven, who get everywhere, never really got on Ulthuan. Humans never tried. The Lizardmen never bothered. No one could get at Ulthuan.
The Norscan assault got repelled by the equivalent of the militia.
I love that story. It's so ridiculous. They failed so hard, they went, no, let's try again and go to the equivalent of Mexico.
Anyway, so the thing that happens after all of this, when we get to actually like quote the time of the Empire and men, and this is the reason why the Phoenix King at present is only the Phoenix King in name.
Okay.
The crown of the Phoenix King is a significant magical artifact. when I say significant magical artifact, even the elves are not 100% sure who made it or when. That's how
Oh.
old it is.
It's sort of one of those, like, same idea as the Blade of Cain. It's one of those artifacts that goes back so far and is presumably something from the gods.
The
Yeah.
War of the Beard, in which the
I was going to
Dark
say
Elves...
you are not getting past the War of the Beard here. We are not jumping that far ahead in time without talking about the War of the Beard. Like, this must be done.
Yes, this is what I was getting to. The War of the Beard, in which the Dark Elves pretended to be High Elves, raided the Dwarves.
Oh yeah, this
And the High Elves, not knowing what the hell the Dwarves were on about and being stuck-up assholes, shaved the Dwarven emissary's beard and sent him home.
Oh, this is something different. From little you've told me about the dwarves, shaving a dwarf's beard has to be the biggest insult possible.
It was, and this started a ginormous war between the two. I believe it was Phoenix King Calador II, if I'm remembering correctly. It was Calador II, the Phoenix King in question, who was, even by High Elf standards, a cocky little shit.
Ooh,
So Calador does this, and the Dwarven response is kind of legendary because it's the first time a Dwarven king or High Lord made this sort of statement. Gotrek, not Gotrek and Felix Gotrek.
Okay.
His great granddad said the following: I will have the hoard equal to my weight in gold in elfin blood, or I will take the Slayer's Oath.
Ooh.
The beardless ambassador had already taken the Slayer's Oath because his beard had been shaved.
That's the level of the insult that the High King of the Dwarves felt he must take his weight in gold in elven blood because a single dwarf had their beard shaved by one cocky little elf. That's how big an insult this was.
So, dwarves went to war.
And nobody won. We'll spare you the details of the entire war. Nobody won.
Nobody really won. But the dwarves decided, after the 14th siege of a city... This is starting to sound like that Italian general from World War I. Just one more time, I'm going to attack that mountain.
Yeah, just
Anyway.
one more lane, man. Just one more lane, and it'll work.
During this siege, they killed Calador.
Which, for the record, it is the first and I believe only time a Phoenix King was not killed by a Dark Elf or killed by old age. I think this is the single kill that goes to a Phoenix King that was not by a Dark Elf.
And they killed him and took the city. And Gotrek snatched the Phoenix Crown, this legendary artifact from an age long ago, and decided that was enough. And his nobles agreed that was good enough. Now the reason why the High Elves and the Dwarves are still mad at each other to this day is because no one wears the Phoenix Crown. It sits in the vaults at the Dwarven capital on a pedestal and is literally used as a tourist attraction.
Now, it should be noted that the next Phoenix King, whose name I have forgotten...
Hold on. It is, and I'm now because again the shenanigans part of my brain now pictures. You can get tickets to see the crown. You have to wait in line. There's the little stanchions to make sure, and it's behind glass, and there's signs saying "Don't touch." But so the High Elves are insulted because it's not used. They're like, it's the same thing of when someone buys $1 billion piece of art and they just store it away and don't show it.
Oh no, the High Elves are annoyed because the Dwarves have got it.
Oh,
The High Elves are annoyed that the Dwarves have got it, and technically, without the original Phoenix Crown, the Phoenix King is only Phoenix King in name.
This
now,
They made a new crown, quotation marks, but it is still considered an extremely gross insult that the Phoenix King has to wear the new crown instead of the OG.
Yes. Now it should be noted the High Elves would going to get the crown back. I don't remember who became Phoenix King next. I think it's Finnebar the Seafarer, who was the Phoenix King up till the end times. But that at this point, remember how the fact that this was started by the Dark Elves? Yeah, it was all just a giant distraction to get the High Elf military weakened so they could just invade Ulthuan again. So the High Elves were like, we will get the crown later because this is a ridiculous insult and it will not stand. But we're kind of being invaded by the Dark Elves right now. We'll get you later, Beardling, and had to leave. And so that's why the war kind of nobody won. You could consider it a dwarven victory because they got the Phoenix crown and killed the Phoenix King. So I suppose you could consider it that. But the war never really ended. It was kind of waved off because the Dark Elves interfered. To use a wrestling reference, it was like, the dwarves had the pin and it was 1, 2, Dark Elves pull the ref out, match gets thrown out, here we go again.
Or to use a different reference, it's the it's the Korean War that's just a truce treaty or an armistice treaty, and they never really signed a truce or a peace treaty.
Now, see that with the crown, my brain goes, should have been like, Bond, we need you to get back the crown.
Anyway, the next Phoenix King is actually Caradriel. And Caradriel goes out of his way to go, okay, you know what? I have been nominated Phoenix King. Screw all of you. We're doing things my way. And what he did was he called the entire High Elf army home to deal with the Dark Elf incursion.
Correctly.
And ordered the forging of a new Phoenix crown, which is, why elves are really upset. And why and anyone who didn't like him, he went, what are you going to do? I'm Phoenix King.
As far as I recall, what they did is the Dark Elves assassinated him at some point, because that's normally how it goes for a Phoenix King.
It is literally, what are you going to do about it? And they called his bluff.
Well, the High Elves didn't. The Dark Elves did.
Right. No. Quick question before we dig into more, just so I don't get anticipated only to be disappointed. Has there ever been a Phoenix Queen, or is it only King?
Okay,
there is the Ever Queen.
So rather than having an interchangeable ceremony like that, you won't be disappointed, by the way, when we talk about Kislev, because Kislev is weird. But anyway, there's the Ever Queen, who does not even answer to the same god.
Oh, yeah. Shit.
So
she answers to the elven god of nature, who controls Araya, who controls all of the various ecosystems and natural phenomenon, and even the weather of the island of Ulthuan.
Yes, and this is where it gets really clever. Are you aware of Alariel? Does that name mean anything to you?
No.
Yes, she's in Total War Warhammer.
Yeah, she's the Ever Queen, and she goes on to become the god of life in Age of Sigmar. Anyway, the original deal is that the Phoenix King and the Ever Queen must have a ritual marriage of 1 year. At that point, they can do whatever they like. Offspring is not mandated, though it does happen on a not too irregular basis. And this is part of the balance between the two, because the Phoenix King is the servant of Asayan, the Ever Queen is the servant of Orion. They live in Avalon, which is, I think, in the north of Ulthuan, if I remember correctly. And as Fee says, they do not answer to the Phoenix King whatsoever. They have a political marriage of convenience, and then they can just separate and do what they like for the rest of time.
So to clarify, where they live is actually in the north central area in the middle of the lake that the horseshoe forms. And second, they're only married for a year. They only have to live together for a year. At which point, the Phoenix King controls the following. He controls the military, the mages, and international diplomacy. So any policy outside of Ulthuan and the military is his domain. Any policy inside of Ulthuan is the Everqueen's domain. So the Everqueen runs all of the runs the guilds, the uh, uh, basically construction projects, guilds, the cities themselves, anything that happens on the island, she gets to say what happens unless it requires the military to intervene.
Yes, so for
And
example,
even then, she has her own dedicated military force called the Sisters of Avalorn, who the Phoenix King cannot command.
So I'm guessing the Sisters of Avalon are mostly a female organization, I assume.
100% if you look at the miniatures, 100%.
So
It is worth
let's say this
noting.
before we get too deep, viewers of the series will find that I am very much strong women kicking ass is almost always going to get a thumbs up from me. So that's why I always do ask those questions, because I find strong female characters in media very cool. But yes, please go on.
Yeah, the only thing to note about the construction thing is there are exceptions to that, such as where the military is involved. So military buildings. So, for example, the ginormous equivalent to the Great Wall of China, that is the gates of Nagaryth, which is fortified against the Dark Elves. That will be entirely a military project, and therefore that is Phoenix King business. The Ever Queen may need to sign off on it, as not offending the nature spirits in the area. But Nagaryth is basically a frozen hellscape, so there's not much nature to worry about there.
Well, and we'll go ahead and talk about them. What the gates are is Ulthuan on the island. I'll actually give you. Let me find the map real quick of just that island.
Yeah, while he's finding the map, I do want to say on a side note, I do find it interesting. You mentioned that it's only has to be 1 year marriage. I do not saying, oh my god, this is the best thing ever, but I do find it kind of cool that it's like, okay, we'll do the political dance, but if you two decide after the end of the year you don't like each other, you can go your separate ways. I find that idea very cool, because it's like, while it's technically a arranged marriage, it's not, you're stuck with this asshole for the rest of your life.
Yeah, and to be fair, there are very few instances where the two stayed together, because remember, elves live for hundreds of years and Phoenix Kings will rule for tens to hundreds of years. Therefore, there is absolutely no point in that, because at that point it starts becoming more political. It is a symbolic union, and no more and no less.
But I'm assuming you said it. I'm sure there's been obviously the few cases where the two went, "Oh no, let's keep this going." But still, but again,
they are rare. I can't think of one off the top of my head. The nearest you get to that is Tyrion and Alarielle, but Tyrion didn't get Phoenix King until he'd already turned evil. So we'll get back to the end times another day.
Anyways, so with this map, you see all the mountain, how like the entire island is ringed with mountains.
Yeah, yo, dog. I heard
there are very few safe places to go through those mountains, and those safe places are where they have put giant gated fortresses. That block the entire mountain pass, and those are like the gates that we're talking about.
I'm noticing. There is literally something called the Isle of the Dead. I'm assuming.
That's where the Blade of Cain is. That's where the Blade of Cain is.
Has nothing to do, because they appear now every episode, whether we like it or not. Has nothing to do with the zombie pirates.
Nope, the Vampire Coast.
It actually does.
Wait,
what? What? I said that as a joke.
Fortune favors the infamous.
Oh, hail the mighty! He's arising from the deep. With tattered sails and incredible tales, we're caught in endless sea.
Hang on. At what point? Hang on. No, the Isle of the Dead. What point did the Vampire Coast get anywhere fucking near the Island of the Dead?
Okay, I have to go explain this now.
I say I mean I'm not going to sit here and say I've got an encyclopedic knowledge of Ulthuan. I don't. I'm nowhere near it. I know like the basic storyline, but that's it. I have never heard of the Vampire Coast getting anywhere near Ulthuan.
Okay, so Cyclostra Direfin was supposed to have been an opera singer who had been personally asked by the Phoenix King to come perform for the High Elves from the Empire. I'm going to start with that statement.
Okay.
On the way there, the Dark Elves hit her ship with a storm. and using magic to summon a giant typhoon.
Yep.
And her ship was destroyed, and she died. Now for the catch. This is where the Vampire Coast gets involved. She was an extremely powerful sea witch in secret.
Oh.
One of her artifacts was in the event she died before fulfilling her great quest, which was to perform for the High Elves. That's the thing she wanted to do most in life. She wanted to be recognized as such a great opera singer that she could perform on Ulthuan.
That was her anime protagonist dream.
But she died. She became a banshee, an undead ghost, and used her magics to resurrect her crew and her ship. And now the Ulthuan has to actively repel her from the Blighted Isle and the Isle of the Dead, because she thinks that's where Ulthuan's capital is and doesn't realize it's on the opposite end of the island.
It should be noted that said capital is typically considered to be Lothern. I know it's not. I don't think it's the official seat of the Phoenix King. It kind of moves around. But at the end times, it's Lothern, the port city at the bottom, because it's the main trade hub and it's main point of like standing armies that can sail out because of the Lothern Sea Guard. So
to answer your question, yes, they do. But she's going to the wrong side of the island. Somehow, every single episode, the Vampire Coast makes it in.
Yeah, we could somehow, I'm willing to bet one episode we're going to talk about some race or whatever that's in the middle of fucking the desert, and somehow the zombie elf pirates are going to make an appearance and have plot relevance.
That will be called the Tomb King episode. There is an army of zombies in the desert. So they're not vampires though; they are undead skeletons. And I'll spare you the Tomb King story. I'll do that another day.
That's
But yes.
And to answer your question, preemptively, yes, they will somehow make an appearance in the in the zombie desert episode.
Oh, my other question is, because initially before you gave me the detail, I was like, well, why don't they just let her, Banshee Ghost in, have someone who's the king, and then that way she can just rest in peace. But the problem
Because
is
she'd kill him.
No, just
I'm Go
thinking
ahead.
that this is where my brain goes to shenanigans. They just make a cardboard cutout of him, don't tell her, and she sings. But what were you gonna say, Fee? I'm sorry.
Because do you have any idea the insult to elven pride if they allowed an undead onto their coast?
I'm sure. I'm sure it's because again, this is a society that pride and honor seem to be the only things they care about, and fuck off.
Yeah,
Kinda.
it's just a
No,
little
not
bit.
exactly. They have their pride, they have their honor, but this isn't a Craft World Eldar kind of scenario where the pride before the fall.
Right.
That comes for AOS's High Elves, the Lumineth, but the High Elves themselves, the Sundering and the fall of Ulthuan, as it sort of was with the Sundering. I'm not going to sit here and say the High Elves are blameless in that, but that is predominantly Malekith's fault. It is not, the High Elves were so cocky and confident they brought about their own downfall. They passed over Malekith for Phoenix King, and he got pissy. That's kind of what it boiled down to, as I recall.
I'm noticing a trend of all of these elves seem to just take everything way too personally, whether or not it is personal or not.
Yeah, bear in mind, fantasy was written in the 80s, and thus your main source of inspiration for things to do with elves was Tolkien. So there's a lot more inspiration taken from Tolkien and classic elven fantasy tropes here than you would find in more modern literature. That's why.
Which is one of the few challenges we've run up against this challenge in a lot of the other episodes too, where especially me, I'm looking through a more modern interpretation of fantasy and just writing in general. Also, side note, Neve, I have a degree in creative writing, so again, I understand. Yeah, and for good or for bad, media and especially writing has evolved for the most part. Not a lot of mainstream stuff, but writing conscious as a whole has evolved. So yeah, I understand where you are looking at, for argument's sake, 40, 50-year-old ways of writing at this point.
So, what happens to the elves over the next 2,000 years of on again, off again civil war?
The answer is not a lot.
Not a lot.
There's
They have a prolonged era called the Age of Art and Decadence, in which the Dark Elves don't seem to show up very much or at all. So they get really into like art and singing and stuff, to the point. I have to illustrate this. Ithimar scale is a unique armor to the elves that is made from the dragons of Ulthuan who work with the elves. Understand that part of being a Phoenix King is the right to command elven dragon princes, who are princes that a dragon has chosen to represent them.
Yes, it
Okay.
is also worth noting that the dragon population has plummeted, so most of said elves are actually just heavy cavalry these days, but that's beside the point. Also, these are the dragon princes of Calador, which is why Calador was named Calador Dragon Tamer. Just tying things together here.
Didra, go ahead.
Yeah, so okay. Now we talking dragons, like How to Train Your Dragons. We talking dragons that can talk. Also need to shout out a very good book series around dragons called Dealing with Dragons. It's a whole long series. I recommend it.
So,
If you like a book series that deals with fantasy and actually pokes fun at itself, it's a great series. But anyways, yes.
unlike the wyverns the orcs tame,
Yeah, those things.
that are pretty stupid,
They are dumb.
dragons in Warhammer Fantasy, first off, have 4 legs and 2 wings, so they can so they don't have to walk on the talons of their wings. Second, they all universally in Warhammer Fantasy are hyper intelligent.
Ooh.
And part of where the elves get their pride from is influences from dragons themselves, who are very prideful and very vengeful creatures. Dragon princes, who mostly act as heavy cavalry, still have to have a dragon recognize them as a dragon prince, which they have to do verbally in a ceremony. Granted, because the dragon population has plummeted because of mismanagement, and General just leans over, looks at Calador, and goes, "You're bad, Phoenix King, and should feel bad."
To summarize, so is the reason the population plummeted was because of war, because of bad repopulation? Like, what's the Spark Notes version of why there's
All
a
of
bad
the above. Also, dragons sleep most of their lives nowadays.
Oh, okay.
With the sucking out of so the defect with sucking all that magic into a vortex instead of letting it roam free is not only the reduction. So the advantage is no more demons.
Yay.
The disadvantage, magical creatures have a hard time. The other factor here is a high elf assault pushed at 2 separate points, and rather than go out and meet the assault and stop the raiding and stop the Dark Elves from raiding and destroying a large area of traditional Moon and Sun Dragon nesting grounds.
By the way, Moon are middle-aged and Sun are baby dragons, for the record.
But you get the idea. Rather than, but the point is that Moon and Sun is the point where they can breed in their lifespan. But the point is this: the Dark Elves came in and destroyed it,
And also nicked a bunch of eggs, which is why the Dark Elves also have dragons.
and they nicked a bunch of eggs and killed what was effectively an entire generation of dragons.
Hey.
And Calador did not ride out to meet them because he did not want to allow the Phoenix Gate to potentially fall. And I'm staring at him and I'm like, the Phoenix Gate is a fortress designed to point outward. If you're attacking it from inward, it doesn't work very well for the defender. So with that in mind, why didn't you go out there and stop this? Calidor, you should feel bad.
This is the opposite of they did nothing wrong. This is Calidor did everything wrong.
Yes. He did everything wrong and should feel bad.
Yeah. I'm not. We're not going to be able to entirely blame the decline in dragons on just this incident. You've got the issue with the vortex, but also there's been an issue since the reign of Belshazzar, potentially, which is the Phoenix King that actually replaced an Aryan. Of dragons spend a long ass time of their lives asleep. There's barely any dragons awake at any point, so there isn't much of a chance for reproduction because they're not awake. And even if there was, well, then you've got all the other issues with magical issues and dwindling populations and
like
slow reproductive cycles and deaths in war, all these things.
You said it best. It was all of the above.
Yeah.
And the reason why they spend so long asleep is dragons in Warhammer Fantasy have to molt, and molting for a dragon can take a decade at a time. And the easiest and for them to do so, it decreases the amount of pain and problems they have to endure if they're just asleep while it happens. And the dragon scale armor that the elves use is actually made from the scales from that molt.
Ooh.
So they don't have to harvest the dragon scales from the dragon, they just go collect the leftover skin.
Which is, when you think about it, a pretty smart way to go about it. It's like, okay, we don't have to kill the dragon. The dragon's not using it anyways. They're going to get rid of it. It's for lack of a better term, it's really thoughtful of recycling.
Anyway, things got so bad that when a recovered shipment of this dragon scale and dragon plate armor was recovered, one of the Phoenix King's court nobles suggested that his theatrical masterpiece could use the surplus of the armor as costume dressing.
What? I guess Eva foam does not exist yet in this universe. For those who don't know, Eva foam is used a lot in cosplay to make armor.
So you know what the Phoenix King did finally to start, getting rid of this problem?
What?
He punched his skull in on the spot. And then started mass reforms in order to fix this age of decadence that they'd fallen into, until he was assassinated.
Okay.
By a dark elf.
Now, okay, this era of decadence, is it, I'm guessing, like the equivalent of like the 20s in America?
More like, think like the centuries of regal royal opulence in Europe would probably be a better analogy.
The French monarchy 10 years before the French Revolution.
Okay, that kind of decadence. Okay, gotcha.
Except this wasn't just, the rich versus the poor. This was the entire population.
So, and I want to emphasize this point. Valdor, the person who started instituting all these reforms, became the 8th Phoenix King to be slain by a trusted friend who was secretly a dark elf for decades.
So I'm now assuming dark elves, because I'm sure we'll have a whole episode on that. Is that more like the equivalent of like a religion where you can be one?
Most of it's equivalent to the philosophy, but due to where they live, many of the dark elves have had their skin tone change.
Kind of like Yeah, go on.
And the ones who haven't are often trained as valuable spies and assassins to get at the high elves.
Yeah, the dark elf the dark elves is it's rooted in a political movement to make Malekith the Phoenix King. And has now devolved into an unending, all-consuming hatred of Ulthuan and a desire to see Ulthuan burn. Even, it doesn't really matter. A lot of them fight for the Witch King, as Malekith is now known, or was known. Sorry, I keep forgetting the end times happened. And
I don't know. We pretend like they don't. It's fine.
Oh no, sorry. When it comes to the High Elves, I'm not letting that not hit the record. No matter how stupid it is, it must go on the record. But yeah. The Dark Elf ideology is very much fuck Ulthuan entirely, no matter what else, and also slaves. Slavery is a big thing for the Dark Elves. But
oh yeah, I was wondering when we were going to get to this topic.
Don't worry, the High Elves don't engage in it. Save it for another day. Right. So we're gonna have to time jump because I'm very conscious of what time it already is. Because otherwise we'll be literally here till Christmas before we get to modern day.
We're actually going to time jump. So at this point, we're going to take a moment. Hi everyone. The show is supported by you guys on Patreon. We don't have sponsors, though. If we did, we're going to talk about those in a moment. We need a few more of you to pledge $1, and I can start getting artwork consistently for this show, as you can see by the lovely piece of artwork that Tactica is being at the moment above my head. Tactica. At this point, normally what we do is what's called the sponsorship break, in which you make up a totally fake sponsorship that we're making fun of some of the things we see on YouTube that people get sponsored by.
Yeah, so we'll start, and if you want to participate, go right ahead. If not, we understand we just dropped this on you. So,
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I can't think of a sponsorship deal that I've seen done that isn't one I've seen 500 times, and it doesn't bother me at all. So go right ahead.
right, yeah. So we'll show you what we're talking about, and we understand if you don't come up with one because we've usually thought of this. I even have notes on my phone roll sometimes. So today's fake sponsor is my sponsor today is FU Convention Center. Would you like? We spoke earlier about putting on conventions. Well, the FU Convention Center specializes in employing only the rudest of staff to ensure that your attendees have a miserable time. We will also ensure that when you would like us to do our job, such as opening doors, refilling water jugs, we're going to take our sweet ass time. We're probably not even do it till the next day because shift's almost over. FU Convention Center.
So, my sponsor today is totally promise that you can be a Scottish lord.
I want to be a Scottish lord. Fee, how do I go about this and impress my friends who really actually don't care?
So, what you're going to do is effectively purchase a plot of land the size of a Mini Cooper, and we're going to call you a lord.
Can I build on it?
No. And technically, you don't even own it. But hey, we say you do, and therefore, by silly Scottish rules that we completely made up, you're now a lord.
So
Yeah.
So, and then we tell a little bit sometimes about the story. So the FU Convention Center, I will explain the story of why I came up with this one. First of all, my convention experiences, you go to enough, no matter even ones that are well run, unfortunately, there's always going to be, it's, the whole nature of, you make a YouTube video and you have 100 great comments, but you have that one mean comment that sticks with you, even though everyone else is telling you how great your video is. Same thing. But the other bit about refilling the water, so this will be a short story. When I staffed BronyCon, RIP, at the Baltimore Convention Center, BronyCon usually occurred during summer, and summer in Baltimore gets really hot. On average, it gets, because unfortunately I have American brain, I apologize, it will get 80 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit in Baltimore. So you can pretty damn hot.
I have a master's degree in physics. You do not understand how bullshit your fucking system is.
I understand it's bullshit, and but either way, it's really effing hot in Baltimore in the summer, and that's when BronyCon happens. So, one year we are asking the Baltimore Convention Center, otherwise known as the BCC, hey, can you refill the water jugs? They're getting emptied. That following year, when we asked them for that, they got pissed off at us that we were asking them to do their job. So we, as a result, had to come up with a code phrase internally within BronyCon staff if we wanted to get more water jugs. The code phrase is as follows. Mississippi Run. Which then meant, okay, someone in logistics and staff would then go to that room and give you water. Yeah, that was a definite special level of bullshit.
Dear, oh dear, oh dear.
Yeah, and there's a reason. There's another convention I staff called Otakon that left the BCC. many reasons. Because one, the BCC in America, sometimes convention centers will upgrade. The BCC refuses to upgrade itself and has also kind of piss poor staff. So that's why Otakon, one of the biggest conventions on the East Coast, I don't count Anime NYC. That's an expo. Otakon's the biggest convention on the East Coast. But Fee, I'm assuming I know exactly what you're talking about with your sponsor.
Yes, and
Sounds
by
like
the
a
way,
bloody Max Fosh video.
and by the way, anyone who was sponsored by those guys, it came out as a scam a year and a half ago, an entire awful scam, and they weren't doing anything for the environment, and they were just keeping all the money. They weren't even registering your name to the land. I'm sorry that your person got scammed into thinking they were giving their dad or their uncle a Scottish nobility, but it turns out that Scottish law still requires that other Scottish nobles recognize you as having peerage.
Oh.
Yeah, nobility systems in the UK are very archaic, and yeah, good luck with that one.
So, next part is we're going to jump into their physiology, and then their government and military, and then we're going to talk about their what are they called? They're really important people. Unless Tactica came up with something in the last 5 minutes.
I mean, there's all the various crappy mobile games that you could probably done, but you've probably done 10 of those already. You've got to be honest, most of the YouTubers I watch either don't take sponsorships or take sensible ones. Even
Yeah.
and I'm counting Raid Shadow
Yeah.
Legends as a sensible one at this point because it's just
Okay, you take Raid Shadow Legends for the meme.
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
it has
become a meme
it
at
has,
this
it has
point.
evolved beyond the point of being ridiculous to the point that it's just a meme. So
But
I
you know
don't
you have
even
Go on.
I genuinely cannot think of a bad faith sponsor because most of the people who I do have a funny story about another YouTuber who was talking about this. So a YouTuber, I think it's I think they do like speed running and things like that. Astral Spiff did a advert for a mobile game. I think it was Dragon City or one of those games, and they specifically threatened to walk away from the sponsorship if they could not make a joke about breeding Mr. Beast Dragon with Dreams Dragon. And they literally said, if you do not let me make this joke, because I've checked your code, I can do it in game. If you do not let me make this joke, I am not taking the sponsorship.
Yeah, I'm similar on like most of the YouTubers I follow that do take sponsors. Either I just skip by it or the ones there's a cooking YouTuber named Adam Ragusia. I will watch his sponsorships because he is so clever with the transition that you just go, okay, you cheeky bastard, you tricked me. That was clever. I'll let you shill at me because that was so good.
Yeah, or there's I watch a couple of YouTubers who are in the Pokemon community who are really good at creating secondary personas for their sponsor segments.
Oh yeah, that ones are always good.
Okay. Let's not dive into the Pokemon community again. Last time we were there for 20 minutes.
Right, okay,
Yeah.
stopping. Yeah, right, okay, back to Elves.
Yes.
Anyway, so physiology wise,
Now I want fan art of elves playing Pokemon. That'd be hilarious. But anyways,
elves playing Pokemon with dragons. Anyway, elves' physiology is they are usually taller, fairer skinned, and slimmer than humans. They also possess 18 pairs of teeth instead of 16.
wait. That's a weird detail.
Warhammer fantasy writers.
As someone who has had wisdom teeth and had most of them removed, that's a weird. Okay, maybe that's kind of why I like elves a bit. But go on.
So they have a couple of extra teeth, and the other part here that is important to remember is assuming they do not die a violent death, elves can live for a very long time, though the only ones who can boast several thousand years at this point are Malekith and Morathi.
That's
The
only
leaders
because
of the
basically every single Phoenix King has been assassinated. Like,
Yeah,
Belshazzar
but-
would still
but-
be here were it not for Dark Elf bullshit.
Now, so my question on that, this is a small lore detail, but it just does fascinate me. So we had when we talked about the halflings, and apologies to on the episodes where I accidentally call them tieflings. I don't know why my brain does it, but halflings, though I also like tieflings, but anyways, halflings, they have like this huge, amazing record that even the elves, even though I think the elves or dwarves won't publicly admit it, but they'll admit that, damn, that's really good record. Do
Both of
elves?
them.
Oh, okay. But then do elves, when we're speaking about at least the elves in this scenario, do they have like the equivalent of like a birth certificate?
No.
Not that I'm aware of.
And then how can you kind of prove without taking your word for it that, insert elf is 3,000 years old?
You don't.
You don't really.
You just have to
Elves
trust that when they
elves kind of don't celebrate birthdays at all.
Yeah,
Well,
like the
imagine
only
that-
t-
yeah. Imagine
Like,
after
the
about
only way you ever keep track of what's going on in Elf is the Imperial calendar. Like, there isn't like an Elven calendar or anything like that. When you look through the old High Elf books, like their old army book, the reigns of the Phoenix Kings are counted in the Imperial calendar because they don't really care.
same time,
Yeah.
it's like, guys, don't have fun. Like I'm sure after like the cake, I'm sure this is the shenanigans part of going. Like after they had a cake with 100 candles, they kind of went, okay, we need to stop doing this birthday thing. The candles won't fit on the cake anymore.
The other parts of actually there is a joke where one of the emperors, I think it's the last female emperor, said to the elven Phoenix Prince at a meeting to sign a treaty. Oh, my birthday is tomorrow, and the elf went, "What is a birthday?"
God, I would read a comic on that on her.
And then like they brought out a cake and everything with candles on it, and she blew them out, and he went, "What do the candles represent? The number of years I've been around?" The elf blinks for a moment. Are you a child? Because he didn't realize at that exact moment that even emperors don't live very long.
And here's the thing, I want that to continue. I want then obviously I know this is not how I want, but be hilarious where that one saw it and it went differently. Instead of just insulting it, are you a child? He then realizes, and when they're handed out the cake, goes, ooh, this is good cake. He then takes it back to the island, and then you have this economic boom of cake shops in the elven world.
I kind of want a comic where the Elven King has to blow out his candles and the cake is like wrapped around the island.
Or it's like one of those big ass sheet cakes that like feeds an entire like huge party, and he like has to now he tries to breathe it out. And he's like he can't get them, and they keep relighting up. So he then like has to get some kind of wind magic or some bullshit to do it.
He's riding by on a horse with a sword, just cutting the wicks off.
Or more accurately, get his pet dragon to do it.
Oh yeah,
Anyway.
something along that lines. God, that'd be amazing.
Anyway, the other parts of elven physiology, they have one of two things going on with their eyes. They either have human-like pupils and irises, or the more magically inclined ones, their eyes are completely black.
Right, and I'm assuming with my model, the artist went for the human version, I guess.
Yeah. But you're in Tactica's model, they went with the human version. But if you go look at like the video game Vermintide and Vermintide 2, the reason why Killian's eyes are completely black is because she's magically inclined. Okay. All elves also are capable of interacting with magic. They might not be magically gifted for their species, but all of them are inherently have access to magic. And in contrast to human wizards, elves are able to master more than one form of magic during their lifetimes because they have the time to continue to study and practice. Lastly, elves are extremely resistant to disease, including most of them, but from chaos. It should be noted that elves are technically vulnerable to Nurgle's rot, but because of how their societal practices are, they're not really vulnerable to the STD version of Nurgle.
Okay. That's
they they have public health care, and public magical health care is readily available, and also elves tend to. I'm going to describe this in a way that's more understandable. Elves' practices around sex are very different from humans because elves, even in Warhammer, do not have that innate drive to be horny. So when they want to have a child, it's a conscious effort to have a child, even with their closest lover.
which we can make the jokes about horniness here and there, but I do find, at least in the cultural sense, I do find that a child, at least from what in theory the way you've described it, it is a conscious choice that both parties have said, yes, we want to do this.
Even the dark elves, who are very sexually explicit in how they look and dress and everything, don't actually engage in direct sexual practices. It's more BDSM. Which is
Literally
kind of
kinky.
just weird,
Yeah.
just to keep reading and reading and reading and going, are you kidding me? And the other part here with their physiology is there are no half elves. Warhammer nixed that after second edition and said, you know what? We're just not going to have half elves and half dwarves and half whatevers. The DNA is incompatible. You can take a
Boo.
human lover, but you're not going to have a half elf.
This is the thing about the Warhammer universe, not just elves, that every episode, almost every episode, pisses me off to no ends. This is going somewhere. There is a quote from Paul Simon when he describes his writing style, that he describes a lot of other songwriters, that their story, when songwriting often ends will end at like a triangle angle and stop. And he says he always tries to make his be like an open book where the story can continue. He like he uses his song Graceland as a perfect example. If you listen to that song, it has the story never, it kind of has a stopping point, but it never ends. Warhammer, unfortunately, just the writers or whoever has command of the lore Bible just does this conscious thing of like, let's just keep finding ways to like end stories. Now, I'm going to say this as someone who's never read any of them, but from all the lore we're getting, they just keep going, yeah, let's just keep ending this potential like ongoing thing. I'm like, really? You can't have mixed races, you racist fucks? I'm sorry, that just seems like such a racist thing to me.
I more suspect it comes down to just keeping things cleaner narratively, because it's one of them of, I get where you're coming from in terms of leaving things open-ended, but you've got to have certain levels of ground rules. Because
Right,
if you go...
fine, but
Guys.
yeah.
Sorry.
I'm going to calm you both down for a moment and tell you exactly the reason why. I have the official reason why from Games Workshop,
Okay.
as of Gen Con 1999, is, and I quote, half elf and half dwarf figures are not selling well enough for us to continue the model line or put lore out for them.
Yeah,
Therefore,
it comes down to
just
the minis.
removing them. Therefore, we're just removing them from the universe.
They did the same thing in 40k. There was a story where it was like a half Eldar Space Marine or something in first edition 40k, and they just nixed it. The same reason why there's the classic female Space Marines thing, and we're not going to get into that one very much. But the simple reason was the minis were not selling, and so there was an expectation.
I'm sorry. I've seen the female Space Marine minis. They're hideous.
And but they would be, because they're genetically enhanced super soldiers made in the 1980s. What were you expecting?
No, I'm not arguing with you, Neve, but it's just this of like, as an enjoyer of buff tomboys, no, there are ways to make muscle babes appealing to the yes, and I understand it's majority males who buy this, but there is a goddamn way to make them appealing.
Yes, it's called the Sisters of Battle and the Sisters of Silence, and I'm one of those people who's quite happy for them to do it. I'm more pointing out it was done in the 80s.
Yeah,
That's
again, here's problem. When you gave me the reason, 1999, we have had over, without going on a huge long rant, it's 2024. We have had about 20 years of advancement in the nerd, geek, dork, whatever you want to call us, in that fandom. where it's like, no, start appealing to the female or the male or whatever base. And it's like, I will just end on this. It's also the same reason why original Teen Titans ended. Do you want to know one of the main reasons why it ended? Because the CEOs, not the writers, there was another season they wanted to do of Teen Titans. The reason why Teen Titans, the original one, not the horribleness that is Go, fuck off, is because the CEOs found that women started to watch the show and enjoy it.
Anyway, I agree. I miss my Teen Titans. I miss my adult stories and cartoons because kids can understand those stories. You should have kept them. But in the meantime, the thing here to understand also is that half-elves exist in lore as recent as last year because of a Gotrek and Felix novel that came out with them partying up with a half-elf. They exist in lore, but there are no miniatures for them, there's no notations for them, and there's a bunch of people on the internet who will tell you they don't exist.
Okay, with the
But in
miniatures not
reality,
existing,
they
that-
do exist. However, the reality of the matter is this. They are incredibly beyond words rare because a human in Warhammer Fantasy on a good day will live to be 40. On a really, really good day will live to be 60 or 70. A elf doesn't even mature to be an adult in
Until they're over
70
100.
years. Meaning that what you will see is to an elf who is a couple hundred years old actually falls in love with a human. To them, the elf will blink and the human will be middle-aged.
Yeah,
The elf will blink again and the human will require aid to move around their house because the human is old and decrepit. And by the third blink, the human is gone.
yeah,
And it
it's
may
a-
be the most passionate, impassioned, loving, amazing relationship you've ever seen. But it's so fleeting to them that many of them simply dare not to ever attempt it.
yeah, to give a different like culture media example, think the Asari in Mass Effect. Like
Yeah.
yes, but the difference with the Asari is that they do it not for, well, some do it for love, but the majority do it for genetic reshuffling because reasons, and they very much are aware that they will outlive any partner they take that's not a Krogan. It's one of those of you know what you're signing up for, and you know it's not it will be maybe not 3 blinks, but same
Yeah.
idea.
I
And it's
guess
also
I
worth
get-
noting that in the case of a half elf, we don't know because we've not got any lore about it really how long a half elf lives relative to a human and a normal elf. Like whose lifespan do they get? Because if they
Right.
get anything like a human lifespan, then a high elf that had a half elf child would outlive their own child.
Right. I'm assuming the easy answer is just straight down the middle where they get kind of the halfway. But I will just end without, because I could go on a huge rant about this. It's like this whole of like, yes, the lifespan thing, but it's also at the same time, it's like life is finite. Unless you are a god, you do not live for eternity. And it's like this whole bullshit and it's again, it feels like a lot of this story and lore is written by men who are not romantic. And yes, I understand we are in a very dark world, but it's just like that is their excuse. I'm just like, no, the whole of like love is
Okay.
goddamn love. But yes, it's just sometimes.
Okay,
Let's go on before I get more frustrated.
I'm
please.
going to say this before you get more frustrated. When we get to the following places, you are going to absolutely not be frustrated.
Okay, good.
Albion, Araby, and the Vampire Coast.
Okay, that last one got really interesting, but
So when we get to the Isles of Albion, the deserts of Araby, and the vampire pirates specifically, you're gonna be like, oh no. Also the Sylvanian vampires too, but that's an entirely different. Vlad, it's your fault the world ended. I want you to know that right now. But anyway, when we get to them,
okay.
Now, in the essence of time, we're gonna go to Tactica, who I assume knows most, if not all, of the different units that High Elves have access to, and is going to tell us a little bit about them.
Yeah, let's talk about military, which doesn't get me pissed off. So let's talk about that.
Right, set me a timer. I'm going to speed run as much of the bestiary from the final edition of Fantasy, because I don't know the old stuff, as I can in as little time as I can do it, because I'm very aware of the clock.
All right,
So-
speed run timer and go.
Right, spearmen, basic infantry, civilian levies, archers, same thing. Silver helms, semi-elite cavalry, may or may not be civilian, can't remember. Then you've got your elites that are normally region locked, so swordmaster Hoeth, twin-handed swordsmen with great weapons, guards of the mages of Safari who live in the Tower of Hoeth. Dragon Prince of Calador used to all ride dragons, now just ride heavily armored horses. We discussed them earlier. White Lions of Crace, official bodyguards, the Phoenix King from the mountain region, and yes, they do kill lions and wear their pelts on their shoulders and wield woodsman's axes. Phoenix Guard, they live on the Isle of the Shrine of Asian in the middle. Never talk because they've all seen their own death and therefore know exactly when they'll die, but they're bound to silence as a result, giving them a 4+ invulnerable saving game because they just never die. Lothern Sea Guard, a combination of spearmen and archers that serve as the naval crews. Breathe.
Okay, pause, breathe
Yeah,
first. Breathe
there's
first.
a lot
Timer
there.
pause.
We don't have to go that fast.
So I have to say something about the Sea Guard. Remember the people who beat the snot out of the Norsicans? It was mostly them. Moving on.
Okay,
No, quick.
then we've got a couple of extra units. So Shadow Warriors, the remnant of Nagaryth that did not rebel alongside Malekith. They hate the Dark Elves. They literally have the rule hatred Dark Elves and work as skirmishers and stealth archers and the nearest thing that High Elves have to assassins. Illyrian Reavers. Scout cavalry, usually because they're from the region of Illyrian, which is next to Nagaryth, the ones that go running off to send messages if the Dark Elves turn up. You've then got, I think I've covered most of the units. Sisters of Avalon, mentioned earlier, Guardians of the Everqueen.
The
Bolt
Sisters
throwers.
of Avalon do not fire normal arrows. Instead, because all elves are innately magical, the Sisters of Avalon actually fire magical bolts from their bows that have no bowstring.
Indeed.
Wait. Oh, well, huh. So magic bullshit, the fire shit.
Yep.
Yes, total magic bullshit to fire shit that cannot miss.
They can miss.
So-
They have a
so
ability
now I
skill of
pick-
4+. They can miss.
Right, but I'm
Well,
also
in lore they can't miss. In tabletop game, yes, they can miss, but in lore they cannot miss because their arrows literally they pick the target and the arrow knows where it is and where the target is and where it is not.
Yeah, it's the meme. The missile knows where it is because it knows where it isn't. But I'm also picturing at the same time, this is shenanigans. I know it doesn't happen, but they're like, they see the target, like, however distance in front of them, and they fire to the side, but because of the magic bullshit, the bolt curves around and hits it. They're like, it's the equivalent of like, hey, watch the shot.
Literally, there's when in the Warhammer Chronicles, there is a Sister of Avalon who fires a bolt down a hallway. It turns down 3 other hallways, goes into a guy's bedroom and stabs him while he's mid coitus with his wife.
Oh, but also like I picture at some point, either if it's lore or not, there's some story that happened of hold my beer while they do the bolt shot.
Anyway, any other units you want to mention?
Tyrannot chariots, literal basic elven chariots. White lion chariots, yes, chariots pulled by 2 lions, and they are as intimidating as they come. And
Chariots pulled by 2 lions with a guy who's wearing the pelt of their parents, wielding a 2-handed axe.
It's a power
2 of
move
them,
right
actually.
there.
And also bolt throwers. The elves do not possess artillery because it's far too cumbersome. They just use repeater bolt throwers, which can either fire single shot or like multi-rapid fire 6 bolts at once. Spread shot, depending on mood. And then for heroes, you've got dragon mages, who are elves that ride sun dragons and are quite novice mages by comparison. You've got normal mages, you've got princes and nobles, you can ride horses or not. Mages can ride horses or not. You've got Eltharion, Warden of Torivreth. You'll know him from the Grom the Paunch story. You've got Alithanar, who is a prince of Nagaryth
Hold on. We talk about notable people last.
Sorry. Well, I'm at the end. There are no more units I can remember.
Okay.
And
so
then
some notes. So some notes here. Elves also have war lions, great eagles, and the reason why they're
Oh, yeah, I
bolt
forgot the
thrower is
eagles.
called an eagle claw bolt thrower is it's not only shaped like an eagle claw, but it has to be light enough for their eagles to carry.
Yeah, because
They
they also
also
go on the boats. That's how the elves fight at sea as well as with bolt throwers.
they
So-
also have the largest collection of domesticated griffins,
Including one ridden by Eltharion.
and they also this is only for the elves that are quote sea elves, which are just elves that live near the sea and operate the navy and the merchant marine. They have what are called merworms, which are distant cousins of dragons that just so happen to live in the ocean, and they ride these things.
Yeah, very distant, and they've never shown up in miniature as far as I'm aware.
And they also, and supposedly in lore, what they do is the merworm is ridden by at least a novice mage, because the novice mage uses their magic to create an air bubble around their head, kind of like a primitive diving suit. So the merworm can dive as deep as it needs to in the water and still come up, and the elf be fine.
Ooh, cool. So, while we're still on military, so I'm assuming from what I got there, even when we're talking, because to give the comparison, dwarves, they have airships, they have armored airships, and I think we've mentioned there's primitive flintlock guns. I'm assuming high elves, they are mostly magic and archery based. There's no
Completely.
real
High elves consider guns three things. One, they're too prideful to use them because they think it's easy mode. Two, they're too loud. And three, and most importantly, they think guns require too little skill to be considered worth their time.
Okay, so gonna break to the loudness one. Okay, I get that one, and that makes sense in warfare. But three, I'm immediately just gonna we just show a picture of Yusuf, the guy from Turkey who did the sharpshooting competition? No, I'm sorry. We have proof that firing with a gun is incredible, requires great amounts of skill.
For a human, yes.
Which is also where we get the meme that Billy Bob from Hockland, who we trained yesterday, just gunned down that elf that's been training for 1,000 years.
Now then, yeah, though I picture, no, this is shenanigans brain. I picture the one elf who like finds in a battle or something, who finds like the equivalent of a sniper rifle, uses and then realizes, holy fucking shit, I could really use this and do some damage.
No, because the basic elven longbow outranges every single gun in the Empire.
Oh, okay. didn't know
So
that.
I want to emphasize this, and no one has taken me up on this one yet. We do have a Warhammer Fantasy Tabletop game that starts in November. You are allowed to sign up for it. We're doing interviews at the end of this month. Here's what I'm going to say. Someone suggested the Elf Gun Otaku, who is an elf who secretly likes guns and just tries to hide the fact they really, really like guns. And I'm just like, if you do that and get away with it, I am going to give you some like special dispensation, because oh boy, that would be funny.
I kind of want to do that character just for the hell of it, because that would be fascinating to play. Because
Okay.
I mentioned on a previous episode, I like
so
yes, go on.
in the interest of time, I'm going to
Yeah.
try to get through
I
these as
just-
fast as possible, because
Oh, I made a
honestly,
massive mistake
most
an
of
hour
them
ago,
are kind of
damn it.
boring. What
What?
was that?
I made a massive mistake an hour ago. I said the Isle of the Dead is where the Blade of Cain is. That's a lie. It's on the Blighted Isle up north. I messed that
Yeah.
up. Sorry.
That's why I mentioned the Blighted Isle instead of just the Isle of the Dead, where
Yeah, my
Direfin
bad.
keeps showing up. Which is funny, because it turns out that Direfin is the most common person to try to raid the Shrine of Cain.
Yeah, my bad. So, yeah, slight error there. My bad. Anyway, sorry. Go on.
All right, notable high elves. Alariel, the Radiant, is the current Everqueen.
And last.
And the last Everqueen, and she's the 11th one to be there, and she has been there for a long fucking time.
This is
So
the point
long, in
about
fact.
Phoenix Kings getting assassinated, because otherwise she'd still be married to the guy for like 5 Phoenix Kings ago.
Yeah, she has literally been married to 7 Phoenix Kings for a year.
Damn.
So if you get that throne, you better like her. Aleth Aranar, aka the Shadow King, Prince of Nagareth,
Yep,
which is a
Alethanar,
kingdom.
He's a Shadow Warrior Lord, and they live in that northwestern area. As mentioned, his bow is so powerful, it's basically a bolt thrower with piercing arrows. It's stupid. And he can
And-
shadow walk.
And
Wait,
Shadow
hold on,
Walk is
shadow walking. What is that?
So
Teleportation.
shadow walking is an elven magic that's restricted to elves because of their innate magical ability and understanding of how the warp works because of the
It's
creation
basically
of the
teleportation. Like save
like-
yourself a paragraph.
It,
It's
it, it,
teleportation.
it is
Yeah.
teleportation, but it's teleportation in the sense that they step into the realm of chaos for a split second and come out the other side without having to pass between the space in between the physical
Oh,
world.
It's that kind. Okay, we're more doing like the mind without going to how Minecraft uses that with the I forget the and whatever world you can do something
Yeah.
similar. Yeah.
So exactly. But the thing that he's done it. The reason why he does it so much is because he's seen what happens if Malekith wins, and he goes out of his way to constantly hunt down dark elves. Now, like the man doesn't sleep; he just waits. He is the Chuck Norris of elves.
That's a pretty badass statement. Not gonna lie, I don't sleep. I wait.
Bellinamr the Wise is the master of the tower. He's the oldest living lore master of the elves and has been there since the second elven Phoenix Prince.
That's
Phoenix King.
Belshazzar for the record.
Yeah.
So that's
He
the guy
is-
after Renarian for the record.
He has been there so long that some people think he's older than Malekith. He might be.
It's worth noting, though, by the end of the timeline, he's not actually in charge of anything magical. Teclis is considered the master of the White Tower.
Yeah. That's true, but but he still Teclis looks to him for advice, even though he never comes out of Bellinar never comes out of the tower. At least by the last 1,000 years, he doesn't come out of the tower because he doesn't want to risk being assassinated.
Yeah, there's a few others. So there's Caradrian, captain of the Phoenix Guard, Corhill, captain of the White Lions, neither of which are particularly interesting because one stands around on the Phoenix Isle and kicks butt, the other stands around the Phoenix King and stops anyone kicking his butt. You've got, obviously, Tyrion and Teclis, who are an episode unto themselves.
They
Hell. Yeah.
There's also Eltharion, whose
Yep.
sole job it is to hunt down anyone who visits the Elven Isles with ill intent. He's literally the elven version of a police warden.
He's literally the warden of Torivres and is the one who killed Grom the Paunch.
Hey,
Grom did not die. Grom left.
I'm just
Same
picturing
difference.
him in like in a police being like, what's going on here? Like just doing that. What was
Shows up in a police uniform. Has pulled over the Emperor's Griffin and is like, "You were doing 75 and a 70. Do you
No,
want to
no, I'm
explain
thinking-
yourself?"
or more British, like, what's this on about? Like the more British way of doing it.
We're
Anyway.
gonna skip Tyrion and Teclis. Everybody, don't get mad. Don't get mad. Okay. They're gonna have their own episode. They're gonna have their own entire episode because Tyrion and Teclis have the most elvish lore about them. Even if I take every other bit of elven lore and combined it, I would get one book, and Tyrion and Teclis would have 7.
Jesus.
They literally have a series all to themselves. I'll make 2 points here about Tyrion and Teclis, and then I'm going to drop it. Teclis is the reason the world died. I don't care about Vlad von Carstein. Teclis fucked everything. And second, Tyrion is of, and both of them are of the line of Aenarian, which means they are cursed because of Aenarian picking up the blade. Tyrion, by the end of the universe, has taken up the Blade of Cain and become an evil Phoenix King, to the point that Malekith comes back to Ulthuan and becomes the Eternity King because, and I'm not making this shit up, this is how batshit the end times was, the burning issue at the start was just him being tested to prove he could actually handle it and be the king forever. And he couldn't stand the heat and got out of the kitchen. It's bollocks. To the point that Malekith becomes the good guy, Tyrion becomes the bad guy, then both of them become imbued by a wind of magic, and then the world ends.
Anyway,
Sorry,
the
I had to
last
get that in there somewhere because it's such a ridiculous thing
the
that you have to say it.
last notable elf is the one Phoenix King who just gave it up.
Ooh.
Finnabar was not from what I can from what I can gather, even on his wiki page, he didn't quote die. He just gave it up.
Interesting.
and told the Phoenix King and told Tyrion, the Phoenix King after him, you can be the new Phoenix King. I'm going to go be king of our people who are not here. And he is literally considered the leader of the Sea Elves. Those are the elves that are not on Ulthuan, who are not dark elves, but are decided,
No,
you know
he
what, I'm
died.
just going to go be their leader. Oh, he dies?
So I'm on Lexicanum, which is always the better place to go than wikis because they actually quote their sources.
Oh, no, I stand corrected. He killed himself.
What?
He allowed, seeing, so at a certain point, he looked up and said, my best option to avoid the fate of the rest of my people is just let the bloodletter kill me.
Wait, the blood. I forget. What is a bloodletter?
Basic demon of Khorne, the red demons with hellblades.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah,
to quote
it's...
Lexicanum, it says, at the beginning of the end times, as Ulthuan was assaulted by demons, Finnebar sealed himself within his tower, trying to work out what the hell was going on. Without his leadership, discontent spread through the courts, and he was found dead in his tower in 2524 on the Imperial calendar.
Yeah, and the thing about this was, Malekith projected himself in a spirit form into the tower. He summoned a bloodletter and locked him in the room with it, and they found him dead about a year later.
Wait.
Because he saw suicide as the only viable option, being locked, and allowed the bloodletter to kill him, because he thought that him dying might stop the end of the world.
Oh, okay. This is one. Okay.
And by this point, he had appointed Tyrion as his regent, and Tyrion became the Phoenix King after him. But by this point, he had basically given it up, and Tyrion was in charge.
I have so much to say, but it would add so much runtime. So I'm just gonna say I'm conflicted on this one. But it's
No. I want to hear it. I want to hear it.
Well, okay. Okay. I'll try and keep this brief. It's like I do find the idea with him. It's like, okay, I have chosen to step down for the throne without getting political, but giving it a political version. It's the equivalent of what America has right now, where Biden has chosen not to continue, and he is giving it to Harris. But that part I find fascinating. Even more so. It's less interesting, especially with humans, because it's like, okay, you're gonna die pretty soon, no matter what. But for someone who knows that, short of someone shooting you or whatever killing you, you're gonna live a long time, to give a position of power away willingly is quite fascinating. But the fact, this is again goes back to my Paul Simon quote, where it just feels like, closing the book instead of letting the book be open, of just like, also opinion suicide is never the right answer. I don't care. It isn't, seek help if you do, but I understand the mentality of that. But in this term as writing, if I sacrifice, I'm like, I sacrifice myself for the greater good only works when it's the equivalent of like, I am holding the horde back so that the heroes may escape kind of scenarios. This does not feel like the right justified version of I give up my life so that the good may happen.
So here's what he thought at that time. He had come to the revelation that he and all Phoenix Kings before him were actually cursed by Asarion, the god who you have to walk through the flames, because they had cheated their way through the flames via magical protection using the Phoenix Crown. The fake Phoenix Crown.
Except bear in mind that several Phoenix Kings had used the normal one a long time before, so I don't quite know how he comes to this conclusion.
Yeah, this sounds like this is a weird theory that
he comes to this conclusion. It's like the end times are terribly written.
Correct.
But he comes to the conclusion that because they've been using the fake Phoenix Crown, they've been cheating their way through the flames. Malekith projects himself, taunts him, and goes out of his way while he's in this spiral to spiral him further. And then summons a bloodletter and locks him in the room with it. The Phoenix King has his weapon and could kill the bloodletter, but he sees that to him, at this point in his life where he's been set here and spiraled for 5 years by a projected form of his antagonist, he thinks to himself, if I die, no one would know, and there would be no need for a Phoenix King anymore. So he just elects to die.
I can see
Think-
why the end times are considered so badly written. Even as
I should also note that the assassination is by Malekith with the assistance of Teclis.
and also
Yeah,
don't we know
also
that-
Teclis is helping him, which is just like, so let me get this straight. The new lore master is helping someone is helping their greatest enemy assassinate the Phoenix King. You know, there's a reason why there are 7 books about Teclis and Tyrion. It's because they're really bad at their job.
It's just from what you've told me, Fee. If this is from the book of the end times, it's like it feels like it didn't even have like, if any for how I took creative writing class, we would write our stories or whatever medium we chose that semester, and then it would be peer reviewed, and people would tear everyone's pieces apart, no matter how good or bad it was. I feel like the end times didn't have a peer review where people should have gone, "Yo, this is really stupid." Like I don't feel
Yes.
that process happened.
Yeah, I agree. Anyway, so that's the High Elves. They are an interesting bunch, and while they're probably the closest thing to a not overtly evil species that exists in in Warhammer Fantasy. I almost said 40K. They're pretty dumb to live that long and not learn their lessons.
I know, right? Even the tiefling, the halflings, goddamn it, the Freudian slipping. Halflings realize their mistakes of, okay, let's create an organization to prevent another pie war, and it succeeded eventually. They at least
We don't
learned.
talk about the Third Pie War.
Right, but what I'm trying to explain is at least that they learned from their mistakes.
To be fair, the High Elves learned a lot of lessons too. Like from the Sundering and all their mistakes in the Age of Decadence and all that, they reorganized themselves into a very effective military force that allowed them to maintain their culture without losing out on their military power at the same time. The problem, I think, is sort of the opposite problem to what the Eldar have in Warhammer 40,000. I appreciate that's a topic that maybe isn't for this podcast, but the Eldar seem to think they could save everything and do anything they ever wanted, and they got bit in the arse for it. The High Elves literally saved the world, were split up by a event afterwards that is not technically their own fault, and then just had to roll with the punches and deal with the fallout. Did they make mistakes along the way? Absolutely. Did they do things they shouldn't have done? Definitely. But if the Sundering doesn't happen, then the Elves would have probably assumed a position as a much more wider, aloof, cocky, disconnected guardians of the world, but would have been very much able to do so alongside possibly the Lizard Men of Lustria. It's only really due to the interference of demons and the Dark Elves, and predominantly Marathi, to be honest, that the High Elves were forced to change, and they did change. This isn't like the Craftworld Eldar, which is a point of reference I'm going to keep going back to, where they fucked up everything for everyone, and they only have themselves to blame. They saved the world, broke up, and then decided to shut themselves off and let the world look after itself, for better or for worse. Right up until the end, when, once again, a mage got too big for their boots, and Teclis brought about the end of the world.
Yeah, that's a good summary.
Though we kind of skipped over this about talking because we got one off on tangents. Do we have any more? Because I do have some questions.
Go ahead and pop your questions,
All right, so
and then we can wrap this in a bow.
So we'll start with the High Elf economy. Is that like what is I always use as the kind of yardstick or measuring stick is what is the level of poverty in High Elf society?
Borderline 0.
It is borderline 0, not just because of the availability of the fact that you can train for an extremely long time, and therefore your craftsmanship as a standard will end up being equivalent to at least a human journeyman, if not a human master. So what the High Elves do, and the reason why there are so many elves that are classified, quote, sea elves, that is elves that don't live on Ulthuan, who primarily are merchants and merchant marine, is they show up to places and go, hey, We literally can. We might not have the best stuff ever, but we literally consistently make stuff that's better than yours. Would you like to buy it?
Yeah, it's also worth noting that every single Elven civilian is expected to serve in the military at a moment's notice, meaning that they must be well fed, well rested, well equipped, and well trained. And that means that you cannot have abject poverty within High Elf society, because those elves who are in poverty and unable to look after themselves can't look after the defense of the realm when called, because they all have their own weapons, every single one of them. Some of them are family heirlooms, but every single elf.
And the elves who don't have a particular talent or drive to get a craft or be an artist or be a stage performer or any things within Elven society dedicate themselves to the Elven militia or to the Elven primary military instead, because that's a guaranteed job. Even if you're just an Elven militia of the Silver Helms. You are correct, by the way. The Silver Helms are just militia cavalry, but they tend to also be the captains of the militia. Even if you're just a Silver Helm of the Elven militia cavalry, that's fine, because you can be that for hundreds of years, and you're sitting there just making sure everyone shows up to militia training, and the state is paying you to make sure that that's happening.
Which is interesting because it like compares to like, I think I forget which one you used, where it was like, I keep forgetting the number, where it was like for every one person in the
For every
military,
4,000 people for every one great sword in the Empire, 4,000 people have to live at or below the poverty line.
all right, which is again interesting how a society can do that. And as we've mentioned before, there isn't like this secret of like, actually no, there's this big secret where all these people live in poverty. No, like you've said, pretty much the poverty level is like 0.000 like 1%. And I think, I don't know if you mentioned this with elves, I'm assuming High Elves have a similar version where even if somehow you've ended up in poverty, there is the equivalent of like unemployment or a job fair or something that then gets you off.
It is no. It's different than that. To elves, to have someone who's ended up in poverty is an abject insult to elven pride itself. And if a noble were to notice someone who's in abject poverty in elven society, it is their duty as a noble to immediately become that person's patron and lift them up from the ground, from the dregs, to be a productive citizen of elven society. The catch here is this: if the elvish noble notices them and doesn't act, other nobles can act against them freely.
Wait, against...
So literally, if there's a rumor that like you saw an elven mother on the street whose father was slain and you didn't do anything, that's such a grave insult to them that's almost like that's worthy of a slap and a demand of a duel to the death.
For the noble.
For the noble, yeah, it would be an immediate to defend my pride and honor.
Because I think the way you
slap you
phrased
and demand
that,
a duel.
The way you phrased that, it came across as if you are passed over by the noble, then others can, let's just use an example, enslave you without consequence. No. That's the way that sentence came across.
Right. So it's the noble's responsibility.
It is the noble's responsibility that if they see someone who has been impoverished for any reason, to stop and become a patron of that person and lift that person up from where they are back to being a productive member of society until they no longer require the noble's patronage. In elven council chambers, one of the gravest insults that can be given is, you passed up a street urchin. Elves will slap each other and demand a duel to the death on the spot for that.
Now, okay, this is where things get now really interesting to me. While I've gotten pissed off about pride, this is the few examples where I'm finding it actually benefits the society, because commentary on American society, all these people going, oh, people on unemployment are lazy, and this, fuck you, whoever thinks that, because I've been on unemployment.
It's not an American exclusive thing, I can say, living in Britain, but go on.
Right. No, I'm speaking from my personal experience, because I've had to be on unemployment. It was actually during COVID, but that's because my entire industry, because I work in the live sound industry. But I find it, and so unfortunately, it's slowly changing, thankfully. But there's been a lot of mainstream bit where it's like, oh, if you're unemployment.
Point about the elves.
Yes. So, but this is where it's going, is that it's the flip on that script of be like, no, It's the mentality of strength is not putting someone down. Strength is pulling up someone who has fallen. That's
Yes.
why I
Cor- Correct. And to give another example, a high elf prince, their banners are actually continuously modified, and the stripes on their banners are the number of elves who they have uplifted who have decided to stay in their service. So they have like, so I'll show you an example of their banner. So like his house crest is the eagle and flames in the center, but all of the rising sun back there, all of those stripes is someone who he's risen up from society, and they have decided to stay in his service afterwards. So when he's basking in his glory, according to the picture on the wiki, that's part of his glory, is saying, I found this many people who needed my help, and now they choose to keep serving me.
Yeah, and what's that little extra bit? It's not just like, oh, you help somebody, because that you could kind of do for publicity, but that someone has willingly chose to stay because they are so thankful to you. That to me is really cool.
Anyway, other questions.
Okay, I think I've asked this about other ones too. Matriarch, patriarch, balanced in terms of rulership of male, female.
The problem you've got there is that the miniatures are the sort of driving force behind most of it, because the literature, well, was written a long, long time ago. So you're predominantly looking at male miniatures, and therefore, but there is a mix in a lot of the miniature ranges, particularly with mages of male and female. There are very few female nobles in terms of the miniatures. I can't speak for the entire lore background, but certainly when you go down named characters and remarkable individuals, generally you are predominantly working with men, but that's due to the writing of, the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s.
Right.
So, but to emphasize this, while a woman cannot be Phoenix King, a man cannot be the Ever Queen.
Okay.
Yeah, both
So
roles
there
are
is so
exclusive.
this there is no Ever King, there is no Phoenix Queen. However, to further emphasize this point, the reason why the miniatures look predominantly male is because elves be thin yo and flat as justice. To illustrate further, the biggest difference that you will notice between male and female elves in the way they dress and portray themselves, female elves will dress in a dress or something with kind of a skirt to it for a very formal event, but male elves also wear skirts for armor and also wear dresses. So to emphasize the point, you don't know if they're male or female until they talk.
So you have, for lack of a better term, a very androgynous dress code.
You have an extremely androgynous dress code, and you can't identify the men from the women unless you're elvish,
Or
or you listen or you hear them start speaking.
in the case of the guy you gave me the picture of, this guy's got facial hair, which we've now had the few bits, because on a previous episode we discussed the silliness of, in theory, my character, it's unknown if can do facial hair because there's not a lot of lore confirming or denial the ability for them to do that.
So to show you like a difference here.
But yeah,
Okay.
also elves in general, in even non-Warhammer, definitely have an androgynous bit to it.
So I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna show you two mages, and I'm not gonna tell you who's who.
Okay, this will be fun.
Okay.
Okay.
So here are two elven mages.
Okay.
Which one's the woman?
Okay. It's a little harder on the second one because of the pose the second one has.
Okay, let me find you another one.
Yeah, because
okay, hold on. I've now given you three pictures. Which one are the women?
Okay, third one's women. Third one is a woman. First one is a man. Give me a second on the. I'm gonna go with man on the second one.
They're all three women.
Yeah, because
okay.
I could have said at a glance that the first one was female. The second one, the angle's just not helpful. The third one I would have said was male, but I wasn't sure. Because, like I said, it's very much more common with the mages, but you do find it as well. I even went on Lexicon to check. There is a title, even if it's not written in the book, as with the unit is High Elf Prince, but you can quite happily take Prince or Princess.
And it also does not.
So you can absolutely have any warrior can be from any gender. It's just one of them of the miniatures are predominantly male because Games Workshop.
Right, Games
Yes.
Workshop. But it also doesn't help. This is not to excuse it, but this is this is an art style. There are certain artists, because I follow a lot of different artists, who it's much easier to tell the men and the women. What I've noticed so far with Warhammer, unless it's very, masculine or very feminine, there's a lot in the middle where it's kind of hard to tell.
Now, I'm going to show you this, and this is so we can all laugh at them for later.
Okay.
This is a dark elf woman, obviously.
Okay.
She's wearing the biggest armored push-up bra I've ever seen because she doesn't have very big titties.
Yeah, that push-up bra is putting in work.
It's not just putting in work. Like she has the push-up bra, and that's the black part underneath. The outer part is just an empty steel canvas that's just there to make it look like she has big boobs. When in reality, no, they have nothing going for them.
She has watched many YouTube tutorials on some version of YouTubers with small busts who would like to cosplay as characters with big busts. She's watched many of those videos.
But this is a dark elf man and woman. The man has bigger pecs than she has boobs in reality.
Yeah.
So that just kind of gives you the idea that yes, for the most part in their society, and I brought up the breast thing because it was like the easiest, quickest way to point at and go, even you can't tell. So a lot in their society is like, if you can do the job, you're given the job. If you can do the job and other people speak highly of you, you're more likely going to be the one to get the job.
So in theory, obviously this is a real world comparison. Unfortunately, and I'm sure in other countries, but again, speaking as point of reference, in America, unfortunately, we still have the issue where even if they're doing the same job, women often get paid less than men. I'm assuming
Gender pay gap is a thing. It's the thing around the world. Yeah.
Right.
The noble
exist in this particular society, in theory.
Yeah,
it's
the noble playwright we mentioned earlier, who Valdor punched in, who Valdor literally killed on the spot with his mailed fist.
Mm-hmm.
That was a woman. He did not hesitate to punch her in the face.
Yeah, I think the way to describe High Elf society is, I want to call it a meritocracy, but it's not. It's a meritocracy with a feudal noble structure layered over top. So you've got your nobles, you've got your princes and princesses, you've got all of those little strata of society, but within those strata, and you can move within them, within not the nobility, there is a meritocracy. If you're good at it, you just get good at it and you get rewarded for it.
Okay.
I wouldn't necessarily call it a meritocracy. It's more like a plurality, whereby it's not how good you are at the thing, because all of them are really good at the thing.
Yeah.
It's when others speak highly of you that you get rewarded for what you do. So
Yeah,
your
which
goal
is
isn't necessarily
your deeds earn you your titles. You get there on your deeds, but it's not about what you do in the shadows, it's what you do in the light.
Yeah,
Right.
pretty much.
Sorry, go on.
Which is why a lot of their dress and everything is very fancy and flowy and over the top, because they want to be noticed.
Notice me, Senpai, to the nth degree. But now we hinted on this in a previous episode. High Elves, what is their diet? If I remember correctly, it's mostly vegetarian.
With a side order of fish, because they are an island after all.
They eat any meat they serve as fish, almost universally, except for the white lions, who eat the lions that they kill to get their pelts.
Because waste not, want not.
But they will sell meat happily to outsiders. So like, you show up and we killed a dragon because it was serving the dark elves, and we're chopping it up to get the dragon skin to make armor. You know what, humans? Here's a bunch of dragon meat. Knock yourselves out.
Yeah,
But
they
for
will
them
not, however... Sorry, go on.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, because bear in mind, what happens on Ulthuan, we talked about the Everqueen, and the Everqueen serves the god of nature. You do not want to throw nature out of balance by hunting down creatures of Orion unless you absolutely super mega ultra have to. Like, I'm trying to think, I feel like there's a story around a white stag type hunt at some point, or I've maybe got my lore mixed up with real world history, I don't know. But generally, you are killing the creatures of the Everqueen, and do you want to piss off the Everqueen? No, you
I
don't.
think no. Which
But
so,
as
So-
said, trade comes through the Phoenix King's domain. So if something happens and, you know, there are others to trade with, well, that's the Phoenix King's decision. So
But
two things related to this. I'm picturing you mentioned that because they're really good at what they are. I'm picturing this as the shenanigans side. High elf butcher who, while doesn't eat meat, it's just they're like, ooh, you should get their meat. They're really good, but that's the silliness. But on the more semi-serious but still fun side, so I'm assuming bards still exist in high elves.
undoubtedly.
So I'm
extremely.
assuming they're the equivalent of in like our worlds, like the Jimi Hendrixes or like Eric Clapton's. They are just considered like the equivalent of like musical gods in that.
So,
yeah.
as a gesture to the emperor, after I think 900 IC, so at 900 900 years after the founding of the empire, when the first human elf alliance was signed, as a gesture to the emperor, he is allowed to request a high elf musician for his court that the elves pay for. If relations are good between the empire and the elves, they will grant the request. If they are not good, or the elves do not approve of the current emperor for some reason, they won't. Hello?
No,
Yeah,
just very interesting. I was just taking in the statement. That's all.
Yeah, it's
Um,
one of those of, I think, if you it's again, it's the whole age lifespan thing. Like, if you want, like, a human could craft their magnum opus in 10 years, let's say. Like, in the time for a high elf to craft a magnum opus, which is incredibly difficult and rare, really, then you would probably go through, and like, the human's entire lineage would have died out by the time the high elf was done.
hmm.
Yeah, so like the high elf musicians are and bards and people like that are sought out, yes. But to flip the question, the only reason they would be serving a human or serving in a human area is either they're trying to find their muse to continue their magnum opus they've been working on for 2 centuries, or because the Phoenix King looked at one of them and said, we have good relations with with the empire at the moment. Go over there and be a musician in the emperor's court till he dies. And he goes over there for like the next 20, 30 years, which to an elf is nothing.
I know. It's just like, oh, it was to you. It was a tragic day. To me, it was the Tuesday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he serves in the court. And more importantly to the Phoenix King, what will happen while he's serving over there in the court is, because human performances are extremely varied and much more common. To give an illustration, the Phoenix King's court only hosts a theater once a year, because that's how long it takes them to set everything up to perfection.
I'm laughing.
But we humans, we host a play in the theater house every day. We host a musician at in the court every day. We have to host these things all this super often. So for them, it's, oh, well, because all these performances are happening and they're so varied and stuff, you might get some inspiration.
On
Yeah,
a side note, I'll be very,
yeah.
I was just about to say, this is no real fault to them, but what I find interesting, we make the jokes, we be like, there's people like D&D, but they're like, man, what if elves, goblins, all this existed in modern times, and I think there's a system called D20 Modern or whatever it's called. I'd be fascinating. I don't think Games Workshop will ever do it because they'd be cowards. But because the problem is, it's like you have Fantasy Warhammer and you have 40K. I'm like, I want something in the middle. I would love the equivalent of that. I'm like, I want the Warhammer universe in modern day society. That'd be fascinating. But anyways.
Any other questions from you, Ginger,
Uh,
aka our average Joe, our litmus test man?
yes. Let's see. On the society, we covered economy. We covered weapons. We covered the male female balance. I'm trying to think of anything else I kind of use as a litmus test to compare societies. We covered food. Um, I think kind of we've covered everything that I can kind of think of to compare all the others, because some of the stories then answered a lot of questions. I'm sure I'll get a question later on, but all the big ones of like, oh, yeah, I'm pretty satisfied at this point. This one, it was both, I was both surprised but also unsurprised all at the same time, because they definitely follow a lot of the common elf tropes we all know and love and hate.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Now I remember. Now on, this is more on physicality. Are you mostly, you're never going to see the equivalent of like, an Arnold Schwarzenegger at his prime high elf. They're all kind of slim and have that kind of toned, but they never reach buff size, I assume.
The greatest strength of an elf is not their physical strength, it's their dexterity and their
Okay.
skill. Like, so
Okay.
for example, in game, high elves never went above strength 3, which is the equivalent strength to a basic human. I don't even think, maybe a couple of their elite cavalry or heroes did, but it was extremely rare to go above
Gotcha.
strength 3. So, but they had an extremely high initiative stat, but they also, in the case of the high elves, had the rule always strikes first. Now, what that meant is that you could never outspeed a high elf in combat. And they also had a weapon skill of, if I recall, it might have even been 5, meaning that they were never, ever, ever easy to hit. Like, generally, elite heroes could hit them on a 3+, and that was about it. And that's a basic infantryman.
so elves' muscular structure and bone structure does not allow them to build heavy, hard-hitting muscle. They only build the white. They can build up the white kind of muscle, the kind of muscle that controls speed and agility
Right.
and movement of joints. They cannot build up the I can pick up a house.
Right.
It's
And
one
for
of their shortcomings in the fact that even elves are actually physically, like, raw power wise, weaker than humans.
right, and before someone in the comment section says it, I know the Arnold Schwarzenegger build at his prime is technically not the strongest. The strongman build is a different build, but I kind of just use that as a comparison. But for physique,
Yeah, but
still
yeah, I
Yeah,
get what you mean.
no, even because of this lack of raw physical power, elven armor has to be made extremely uh detailedly for the person who's wearing it,
Mhm.
because if they try to put on really heavy armor, they lose their one advantage, and that's speed.
So like in D&D specifically, there's a penalty if you don't have the like feet for it. If you wear heavy armor, I'm assuming it's that, and then even worse then.
So
It's
the heaviest armor you will see an elf in is like a high elf lord will have a plate breastplate and a plate helmet, and the rest of it will be scale mail.
Mm.
He will not have plated greaves. As a matter of fact, most elves don't even have armor on their hands. They rely on skill to protect them.
Yeah, I mean, you can
And
see on the mages in the picture, they do have like wrist guards. They're not full on greaves or van braces.
yeah,
Sorry, greaves are down your legs, aren't they? I mean, van braces. Um, but generally, I just come back to gameplay because it's easier to measure. So, light armor conferred a 6+ save, heavy armor confers a 5+ save, and dwarven gromril armor confers a 4+ save. And elves never went beyond heavy armor. Like dragon scale plate armor is probably as close as you would get. And you
this
can have,
is
yeah, that's a fully armored elven
this is
noble.
this is the Phoenix King's armor. This is the heaviest armor they have.
So yeah,
And you can
it's
see it's a scale shirt with a couple of hip guards, a solid breastplate, and a solid helmet, but the rest of it's all scale mail. Nothing, and he's even got parts of him that's just covered in cloth or not covered at all.
yeah, you've got like armored boots and you've got proper armored van braces, but generally it is more about it's not form over function. Far from it. This armor is as tough as anything the Empire will ever make, but it's designed to maximize protection while minimizing inhibition of movement. Because the purpose of an elven warrior is not, I can sit here and tank all day. It's
Right.
you're just not going to be able to outwit me because either A, I'm going to block your attack, or B, I'm going to dodge your attack. And on the rare occasion that I get overwhelmed, well, I'm not going to because we fight as a phalanx. Like heroes, this is not like solo heroes going around caving people's heads in. The entire premise of the Elven military is we work as a team. The civilian units fight as one. Like it's not quite like the Lumineth where the spears come down at the very last moment to get an impaling strike, but it is all about working together. If you have to fight in ranks, that's fine, but we overlap our protections. We've got shields, we've got long spears. You will not get to us. And if you do get to us, then, we're just going to get out of your way. If it goes to a one-on-one melee, an elf will win. If it's a horde battle, the elves lose purely because they get drowned. They will never get beaten on raw skill in a straight slugging match. Ever.
Further with elves, if it does devolve into a one-on-one fight, something went wrong. Because for elves, particularly like militia units, they've been training together for so long that all of them know each other's movements and quirks and everything about how each other fights, to the point that without speaking a word, they will know if someone is relying on them to block a blow and step in to put the shield up to block something that would have hit them.
Yeah, it's like to the outside. It looks like telepathy. It's not, but it looks like it.
Right. Like you said, they know each other so well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And any final questions? Because we need to wrap up.
No, I think that's a good note to end on that one.
Okay. So thank you all for being here. Tactica, do you want to plug anything?
Apart from Adeptus Podcasters, which is probably the only thing that anyone knows me for these days, no, because I don't take sponsorships. I don't run a Patreon because I don't make enough content to make it worthwhile. Just come over to 40k Theories, which is where Adeptus Podcast is held if you like the way I think and like the way we talk about, or just somehow decide I'm not obnoxious and annoying to listen to, then 40k Theories, Adeptus Podcastus. Fiora was on there not that long ago, so you may already know. We're 206 episodes deep, so good luck catching up. That's all there if you want to check that.
Actually linking an episode of Adeptus Podcastus in the description.
Excellent. Well, then you've already done everything I would need to do. So, I do have a channel. I've made like one video in 2 years because between having a child and having a job that's full-time and very intensive, and also having a life, I don't really have the time for the hobby or making videos anymore. So I won't even bother going on a promo about what I do because I don't do anything apart from that podcast.
Ginger, do you want to go over anything?
Nothing for me really to promote or anything at this point. I think we're pretty good.
Okay, Patreon guys, again, we need a couple more people to pledge $1 and I can consistently have artwork up every single episode. And 2, there's still a sign-up sheet in the description if you want to sign up for the 40k or for the Warhammer Fantasy. God, my brain today is not on straight. If you want to sign up for the Warhammer Fantasy tabletop game, you just fill out the form. I will sit down and make a character with you. I actually sat down on stream yesterday and made a character with a person live on stream, no questions asked. So just sign up and we will get you taken care of. And interviews are at the end of this month. In the meantime, it's been lovely to have you, my brain just died. What is your actual name? Starts with an N.
Neve.
It's been lovely to have you, Neve. You've been wonderful. I hope you've had a good time.
Yeah, I apologize
I'm
for doing exactly what I've just done, which is butt in and talk over people, but
No, it's
Discord.
fine.
No, you're fine. You're fine. We do it to each other, so you're fine. We're 40 minutes over our intended target time, so I hope you were having fun.
Yeah, this is another thing you'll learn as a podcaster is you've got to learn when to stop rambling and call time. You will learn this.
But at
Anyway.
the same time, there's also people who enjoy long forms, but I get exactly also what you say at the same
Oh no, I
time.
do too. I could quite happily sit and do a podcast this episode for 4 hours, but you've got to know when to stop because you guys need lunch, I need dinner, and you guys have barely had any. We've woken up in the middle of the show, so I'm not. It's one of those. If you will learn, as from experience, of when to stop talking or when to say, actually, we need to move on. You'll
Or
learn.
sometimes even in other cases, just have to admit, okay, this needs to have. We have the recording. Like one famous one of the podcasts I follow is
Anyway.
What Your Problem. They do 2-parters sometimes, but yes.
Hit the like button, everybody, and we'll see you next week for Bretonia with Recall. Or Raycall. Her name is Raycall. We'll see you next week with Raycall for Bretonia, and then I think we don't have a guest for another 3 or 4 weeks, so it'll just be me and Ginger ranting about other things.
Well, because
But we get to talk about...
I'll be on a boat for a bit, so there'll be a momentary pause while I get on my new schedule. Once I get that all settled in, then recording sessions will resume.
Anyway, have a good day.
Bye, all.
Hello, everyone. I was asked to record this so that I could read your names out loud because I promised to do that last time. Anyway, we have first our Eternal Scouts, Commissar Von Holtz, Fraser Harris, Jesse Fishinghawk, and Short 2K. Up next, as this scroll wheel will eventually get up here and I can start rambling your names off, we have our Chief Engineers of Chaos, of which there is currently only one, Adagio Rose. Congratulations for having your name at the very top of the list. I hope you're proud of yourself. Up next, we have executives of the Slanesh Studio, Fopdoodle on Assignment Spaghetti. What is Assignment Spaghetti? Is that like a spy thing? Come on, tell me about it. Stargazer Song. So do you sing about stargazing or do you sing while you're stargazing? I'm curious. Sun Dancer. Enough said. Special Writing Cannons is our next tier, and we have Chaos Blur. Are you just a blur of chaos that just so happens to be like Slanesh Korn and Nurgle got together and things happened and now Zinch has to deal with it? Drinking Buddy. You can be my drinking buddy anytime, honey. Nozimo. Solar Aura. I'm wondering if you're a solar flare or if you put down solar flares. I'm actually curious. Thomas Curry. He's Tom. He brought me curry. That's about all I needed to know. We have the Twitty Lounge Pass from Bronze L. And Sean, a.k.a. Heart Moonstone Luntina. That is, by far, the longest and most number of nicknames out of this entire list, and I hope that you are genuinely okay with that. We have our Explosives R&D team. This is Bale Watt. He's bailing out somebody. Blackjack. I didn't realize I was sponsored by that person. We need to go talk about that. Naros. There's no vowels there. I checked it. I lurk into corner. You can stay in the corner all you want. Just be happy. Michael Bones. Michael Breeden. The Michaels. They're boning and breeding. Pony Chick 16. She's been here forever, and I still enjoy the fact that she's still here. Ryanie Dragonwolf. Stormy Skies. I think I misspelled your name. I'm sorry. Vivid Syntax. Zeeb 2008. Now we have our Office Raiders and Pirateers. 50 Shades of Australia. That's Nightmare Fuel I didn't need tonight. Brendan Kendall. Insane Scorpio, the sus one. Yes, you're always sus. Justin Ray. There's no vowels there. Where are the vowels? Carl Bragginson. Legate Lori. Are you with the Roman Empire? Loon. That's his entire name. Shadowman 1725. The Phoenix Lord, a.k.a. Captain. Aye, Captain of my Privateers. Testing audience, we have Benjamin Recliner, David Fenwick, Paulus the Mad. That guy's been there since like year 1 and he's still here. Thomas Hugan. He's Tom. He's about to Hugins. Maybe give the Hawk Tua lady a run for her money. Producer credits, we have Craig Held, DeBurch, Final Sight, Meh, Scott Vogel, Sleeping Soul, and Thermesto 97. They just wanted a producer credit. You technically helped produce this. Congratulations. I would also like to offer special thanks to Caffey Cup, my wife, for tolerating my insanity and my ramblings. Mary the Tank Mom and Winston the Tank Dad for helping me get my start in life to begin with. Reggie, my wife's cat. May he rest in peace. Goodbye, Reggie. And Scott Vogel, my co-host and editor. Yes, his name got said twice. Deal with it. In the meantime, please do show up next week where we're going to talk about Gotrek and Felix. I am correcting it now because we've already done the Bretonia episode. We'll be talking about Gotrek and Felix. Hit the like button, and if you want your name up here, it's $1, and I will have to change this and re-record this and read it again. Good night, everybody.